All right, welcome to the Valley Podcast, episode number 12. Today actually marks our 1 year anniversary of starting the podcast. So if you stayed with us this long, thank you. We appreciate it. And my guest today is a business owner, owns Optimal Power Performance, also certified in an HLP certified instructor, as well as some driveline certifications, strength and conditioning certified. Super excited to have him on. I got AJ Arroyo with me today. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me here, bro.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
I want to start kind of just give a little background on yourself, kind of how you got into coaching first.
Yeah.
And then we're going to jump into a lot of different topics today, but kind of want to give some people a little background on you first.
So I played a little bit through college and indie ball. And in that process, I was hyper obsessive about my training. More than the average person, So because I realized through high school I was actually kind of a troublemaker. Got in a lot of trouble. I actually got kicked out of high school.
Really?
Got expelled. Yeah, and I was like in and out of jail and.
Really?
Yeah, I was really lost, And when I got to college, I realized I'm behind. In high school, I kind of favored my physical abilities, and so I was fortunate enough to be stronger, a little bit faster than the other kids. So I just kind of excelled that way, When I got to college, though, I realized all these other people were stronger, they were faster, they were better, and I was like, oh man, now I actually have to work. So at that time, I started doing a lot of research on strength conditioning, throwing, hitting, just trying to find anything and everything that could put me up, get me ahead of the competition. And so anyways, I started doing that. I started to find a passion for that. So I was the guy that would show up 2 hours early and stay 2 hours late. And I'd go to the gym in the morning, and it was just I'd hit the gym twice a day. And I was doing too much, but I didn't know any better. I was just trying to figure stuff out, And so that lasted throughout college and into indie ball. And then I just kind of started taking people on for free online. And so my method to this was I'm just going to test and figure out what works and what doesn't. So that way I can selfishly just put it towards my training, right? And so going through that process, though, what I realized is that I just started posting free content online, and a lot of people just started going into my DMs and asking me hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I was just posting my workouts and stuff, And so I was like, hey, how about you just train with me? I'll send you stuff on an Excel spreadsheet, and you just send me your data after every month and let me know here's the stuff I want you to test, and just let me know if you're getting better or not. And so that's how it would happen. Eventually, it went from 10 people to 20 to 200. And so I was managing 200 people for free online consistently for a couple years. So then it got to the point too where I'm an indie ball. I was I'm probably going to start charging for these programs now. So I lost a lot of people because these were people, by the way, when you're in high school and college, you're broke,
Yeah.
and it's hard to be able to afford training programs.
Sure.
I get that. So, I think I was selling them for $50 a month or something like that. And even people who I really liked, I was all right, you don't have to pay me. Just keep doing what you're doing so I can know, And so eventually I did that for a while, and I started to find stuff that worked a lot better. So I started gravitating towards Louis Simmons with Westside Barbell for strength conditioning, Kyle Bodie with Driveline for throwing development, and then Richard for hitting development, which is the high-level pattern. Mm-hmm. And as I started doing that, I was man, I feel I'm really onto something. My game's starting to pick up. I went from throwing 85 to being able to throw 95 across the diamond. And that's a run and gun, by the way. That's everything that I possibly have. So it's not I could do that consistently, but I was able to bring my peak up with throwing. I got drastically stronger, a lot faster, and then obviously my swing improved, but my inconsistency was still there. There was a lot of mental anxiety, going into games and stuff like that. But I felt I was improving the big needle stuff that scouts actually cared about.
Yeah.
And it did get to the point when I was in college where scouts were texting me hey, I'm going to come watch your pro day and stuff like that. So it was I felt I had it, but I really couldn't put it together. I just wasn't very consistent as a player. And so I remember my pro day, and this is kind of when it hit me in the face a little bit, man, maybe I won't do this for a long time. The scouts came. There was a couple there to watch me specifically, and I watched them leave after my rounds for hitting. They didn't even stay to watch the defense. And they texted me after, and they're man, you have it. You can throw hard, because I did a little bit of the outfield before, and I didn't finish the infield before they left. So I did a little bit of the outfield. I ran my 60. I did the hitting. And they were like, you have it, but you just don't put it together. So, like, it's too inconsistent, you know? Like, I would hit a home run, and then I would also, like, foul off, like, 3 MVP. You know, like, it just wasn't. And that's how my game actually was, too. I was the guy that could, you know, one game go 3 for 4 with, like, a home run and 2 doubles, and then the next game I couldn't hit water if I fell out of a boat. It was just constantly up and down. So I shot my shot in indie ball, played in Puerto Rico for a little while, and then I came home. And I was going to keep trying on indie ball, but my wife, me and her had a baby at that time. So she was like 9 months pregnant when I got home. And I remember going to a softball field, and it was like one of those connected softball fields where there was a softball field behind it and a softball field behind it. And I was like, man, I'm getting paid to play, which was trash. It was like $500 a month, you know? So it's like, I'm not really good, but it's like I'm getting paid to play, and I'm over here practicing like on a softball field because I can't afford to like go get training, you know? And I'd swipe my credit card for training all the time, and it was maxed out. So I was like, oh man. So I go over here to the softball field, and I just remember taking ground balls there. My pregnant wife, who's not like literally about to pop, hitting me ground balls off a tee with like my small one-hander bat, you know? And so like that, think about how that makes you feel as a man, you know, like it's just like so less than. And then there's all these kids practicing around the field. I'm like, this is sad. Like I shouldn't be here, you know? Right. And so I went and picked up all the balls, and I sat like in this open, it's not a dugout, but there was like a bench. And I sat there, and I was like tying my shoes, and my wife saw a ball in the outfield, and I watched her waddle her, you know, pregnant self like all the way out there to pick up the ball. I just remember looking at her, and I'm like, I'm not going to put my kids through this too. Like there's no reason why somebody should struggle this much and also put all that anxiety and stress like on their family. So I was like, I got to provide. So it was right then. I never put my cleats on again after that. Like I wanted to, but I never did. So I just knew that I was done. And so I started on a whim. I just like sent a message out to everybody. I was like, hey, I'm coaching now, like full time. It wasn't full time. I went out and got another job. And I was like, if you want to pay me now, like that'd be great. So I started renting spaces from everywhere, all around Arizona. Like, I mean, I'd rent a hitting tunnel from one facility. I'd rent, you know, a mound if I could from another. I'd go over to Little League fields, and I'd pay the hourly rate to get the Little League fields and do that. And then I'd pay a couple different, I was like 1099s for a couple different strength training facilities to go do that. And so all the money I was forking out, I lost money every day doing that. And so my other job, which was driving like autonomous cars, like the self-driving, like testing them, that like allowed me to afford to do this because I didn't know anything else to do. I knew I couldn't drive autonomous cars forever.
Right.
And I also knew that I was the person who couldn't sit behind a desk and like do it that way, you know? So I was like, man, I just want to try to make the coaching thing work just enough to like pay bills. Yeah. And so that way my family didn't have to struggle. And so I was like, I'm just going to try this for a couple years and just see if I can make something happen. If not, like I'm going to provide. So like I can go do manual labor all day, you know, I'm not scared of work, but I really wanted to try to make the coaching thing work. So eventually it got to the point though where like referrals started coming in, more people started finding out about it. I kept posting content online, but it wasn't like I was getting a ton of outreach from content at this time. And it finally got to the point where my income surpassed what I was doing with autonomous cars. And so in that moment I was like, it's time to go all in and like just do this thing. So I told you a little bit about this yesterday, but now at this point, it was like all these places that I was renting started to see that my clientele was picking up, and they started upping their prices, and then they also started like kicking me out. Because what would happen is I would train these guys, and I had a very particular way of doing things that not all these places were doing. And so like we would have assessments, I would track all their data, because I was still heavily into testing. At this time I knew like I didn't know enough. My prices were very low for that reason, because I couldn't get like consistent results on a consistent basis. I didn't have systems yet. So I was just trying to figure stuff out. I did that for a while, but I kept getting kicked out of places. I kept getting fired. And, you know, there was this one place that I really started to succeed. I think this was like 2018. And in that moment, I told him, I was like, man, this is the most money like I've ever made. You know, like I feel really good here. I'm going to help you build your brand. I'm going to do anything I can to like help you succeed. And he was all for it until the moment that I started making more money than he was with training. And then he was like, look, like no other company would let you do this. And I was like, dude, you set the rules. Like they're paying the membership fee that you set, and they're paying the prices that you allowed me to charge for this like what do you want me to do? You know? Because I said, if you change it for me, you have to change it for all these other trainers.
Right.
And he wasn't willing to do that. And so then one day I walked in, I had a full list of clients that were coming in to strength train with me that day, because he was the main gym that I was using at that time for that. And he just handed me, he couldn't even fire me to my face. He like handed me a letter, and I opened it, and it was like, you're fired. And I was like, cool. So what do I do now? Like, all these people paid, they were paying a month in advance, right? It was like a membership. Yeah. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. So I just started, I told everybody when they came in, I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to figure this out. You know, just give me a little bit. So I went and rented space from another place. I didn't lose any clients, and I figured it out. But after like a couple months there, the same thing happened there. And I was like, okay, all these people are seeing that like I'm succeeding, and they don't want me to succeed, because then I succeed too much for them, which doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Especially when you're 1099 people, like, you want them to succeed because it funds your business, right? But it was more like an ego thing. And then there was this like breaking point before I opened OPP. This is a long-winded version, so you can stop me.
No, that's good.
There was this breaking point before I opened OPP where I got offered, I'm not going to say the franchise name or anything, because I don't want to throw them under. But I was renting tunnels from them, pitching from them, and they were like, hey, you know, the CEO wants to offer you something, because we're going to open up like this new sector to the franchise where you basically input these systems that you do for throwing, hitting, strength training, all this stuff. And you can basically like help onboard like our professional athletes, and, you know, teach our staff how to do these systems that you have. Because most people at this time, it was just like, they were stuck in the lesson paradigm where you would go and you pay a private instructor at this facility for like a lesson once in a while. And all my people had to pay a month in advance, because I knew that I couldn't get the data that I needed if they were only going to see me like once a week. Like, it's not real development when it's like that, you know? So they were seeing me like 4 times a week for strength training, 5 times a week for hitting. I managed all their throwing, everything. And they liked that. And so they offered me 6 figures for that job, and I was still broke. Like, keep in mind, like when you're renting space, this is the most money I've ever made, but I was renting spaces. So like I would go work for 8 hours and I'd make $20. Like profit,
right?
You know, because I still had to pay my rent at home. I still had to pay rent for all these other places. So like, even though I was making thousands of dollars a month, I was making nothing.
Right.
And that's when like I realized, I was like, okay, if I take this opportunity, they could also just fire me in, you know, a couple months after I teach them my systems, and then it's like they're just going to run and play with my systems. They don't need to pay me high anymore, because they could just pay somebody else lower to regurgitate the same info. So I was like, no, I'm going to turn that down. My wife thought I was crazy, because now at this time we're pregnant with our second, and I was like, I'm just going to go find a facility. So I found a warehouse in like a week, and I emptied the bank on it, emptied all my credit cards, and I just started OPP.
Wow.
And that's how it happened. A little 2,000 square foot shack in the like hood of Tempe, Arizona. Like, we had literally like crackheads and prostitutes like coming in through the back alley.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, I would have like 15-year-olds on the floor training, and there'd be a dude like smoking a blunt in the back alley, like blowing reefer in. And I'm like, bro,
oh
please,
my
like,
goodness,
please leave. You know, like, I'm trying to run like a business now, you know, like my life depends on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, and nobody left. It was great. Our average client still to this day stays with us for like well over 4 years. So,
wow.
I don't know.
Incredible.
I think right around that time is when I realized like I could actually make a big impact in this game.
You're onto something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since then, that's kind of where I've been.
Couple of things. One,
Yeah.
your wife deserves an award for hitting you fungos off a tee when she's 9 months pregnant. Is you know, that's one. Two. Yeah. I want you. Was there a point, like when you talk about your childhood, you had, you know, you were making some bad decisions. Was there a turning point? I know you said when you got to college, but was there a turning point when that changed for you? And
Yes.
if there was, what was it?
I skipped over the most important part. I went to this school. I'm not sure if they'll want me to say their name or not, but I'm assuming they would. Ecclesia College out in Arkansas. And so I got to backtrack a little bit more. So when I went to jail for the last time, I was like 18 years old. I was in and out of juvie from the time, you know, I was like 12 to 18, like consistently in and out of the system. And I would always do like 2-week stints, 1-week stints. And this ranged from anything and everything you could imagine, you know, drugs, fights, the whole nine. And I didn't really have like that moral compass to tell me like, this is wrong. I didn't have that feeling, you know, in your gut. Like when you do something wrong, you're like, I shouldn't do this.
A conscience.
I just didn't have it, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't really grow up around any of that. And in the area that I grew up in, I saw a lot of people making money doing things that is not the most advisable way to like do things. So I thought that was kind of normal, running my life that way. And then when I got that, the last time I was in jail, I tried to pick up the Bible and I tried to read it. And it was like another language to me. I had no idea what I started in Genesis, probably not the best way to start. And I was just reading it and I'm like, it literally, I felt like I was reading French. Like I had no idea. And I closed it and I was like, all right, I'm just going to pray. And so, when I look back on this moment now, like I kind of tested God, but keep in mind, I had no idea about anything. Like I was very green to this whole like spiritual side of things. And so I just asked him, I was like, look, if you give me another opportunity to play baseball, it's the only thing I've ever been good at in my life. I had all these D1 letters sent to me when I was like 16 in high school. And I was like, if you give me an opportunity to just play in college, I'll know that you're real and I'll change my life. And so I stopped. And I got out that last time and I got a call from Ecclesia College. And I remember sitting in the car with my mom and I was like, hey, I'm just going to like go get a 9 to 5 because nobody's going to want me now. I haven't played baseball in like 2 years. And they were like, hey, I saw a video of you when you were like a sophomore in high school and you were on one of these like scouting things. And he was like, what happened? I told him the whole story. I was just very honest. And I was like, look, I'm trying to play still. And he was like, okay, we'll give you some money to come play. We have a new baseball program. So they gave me a scholarship and I went out there and I played. And when I was out there, best decision of my life because it was a Bible school. So like every class was based around the Bible and I started reading, I started praying and I got saved. And then from that point on, I finally had that like moral compass. So when I came home, keep in mind, like your environment really does dictate a lot about you. And so I came home to the same environment, like the same friends doing the same things. And I remember sitting in a car and this is normal at this time, but everybody started rolling up a blunt and they passed it to me and I took a hit of it. And right when I took a hit of it, I had that first sign of like, this is not okay. Don't do this. And I was like, wow, I've never felt that before. So I passed it back and then it came back to me and I hit it again. And I was like, I'm like sick to my stomach now. And I was like, I literally can't do this anymore. And I've never done drugs or anything ever since. And so I think that is when it like hit me in the face that, there's a different life that I need to live now. And I have a totally different compass for like how I make decisions. And, so immediately I got out of that environment as fast as I could and haven't spoken or talked to anybody since then.
Dude, that is so powerful. And it's such a true thing. The Bible talks about you have a new mind.
Yeah.
You're a new creature.
Yeah, I felt it for the first time.
And like, that moment of feeling that,
yeah,
like of never having an issue with anything before and then having that conscience, I didn't know that, but it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never told anybody that before. So
I appreciate that. That's a powerful testimony.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned when you were kind of sharing your initial story that kind of piqued my interest a little bit was you talked about you had some mental anxiety.
Yeah.
When you were playing. Yeah. Would you mind kind of talking about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it got worse when I was in college. It got really bad in college. In high school, I didn't have it. I operated by ego, and I was like pretty good. Not to like toot my own horn or anything, but I was getting letters from a lot of D1s when I was like 15, 16 years old. And back then it wasn't like they're going to talk to your coach or anything. It was like you got a letter in the mail directly from the school and letting you know that like you're a prospect. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. Nobody in my family went to college. I didn't even know if that was a cool thing or not. But every time that I got arrested and I went to court, my mom would bring those letters. And I had the same judge like my whole life. And the judge, the last time I was got locked up, he was like, look, if you can stay out of trouble until you're 21, like I've given you every opportunity. At one point in high school, I had 2 probation officers, which doesn't happen. I had a 7:00 curfew I had to be home by, and I was getting drug tested like every week. And he was like, this doesn't happen. Like you realize that like people in your situation where you're at, and maybe it's because I grew up in Boise, Idaho. I think if I would have grown up in LA or New York or something like that, just being how I looked, I had full sleeves at like 17 and neck tattoos at 16. And it wouldn't have been the same way, so luck was on my side with that for sure. But when that last time I was looking at him, he was like, I'm going to give you one more chance. The next time you're going to prison. So that was probably why I opened the Bible, like when I went for that last stint. But I didn't really think it was an opportunity for me until I got out, and I was like, man, I have nothing else. This is the one thing that I've been good at. This is the one thing that everybody told me I was going to be a professional baseball player when I was in high school, but I didn't think anything of it. I didn't like care enough. I cared more about status and what people thought of me. And every time I got in trouble, I got more popular. And every time, I created a party or I invited XYZ to this house and everybody knew who was the connect and stuff like the girls. And, it was like I started blowing up in a way that made me feel good. And I didn't realize like, oh, there is absolutely no future in this besides prison, Right. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No. So like when did you have anxiety when it came to games?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So when I got to college, I find that's why I went into that story, is now I had something that I really wanted to do. I felt like this was going to be my way to provide for my family. I was going to retire my parents. Like
added pressure.
Oh, it was
on the whole thing.
Like why at 18 years old, like 19 years old, like I'm worrying about retiring my parents instead of like just succeeding in the moment. And so it was like every at bat, I could feel myself like getting significant anxiety beforehand, like shaking, heart beating, like every at bat. It didn't matter for like 4 years, like because I just kept thinking this is the only thing that I have. I didn't have anything else that I was good at. That's why I was also super obsessive. So, I would sleep like 4 or 5 hours a night and I would just study. I didn't do any schoolwork. I passed, but it was like all I did was this, Right. And so I think it was unnecessary pressure that I put on myself to try to perform in game. And if I knew what I knew now, I'm convinced things could have been different for me, but I didn't. So
did that experience help you? I mean, now you're a coach, so you can relate to players who deal with similar. I mean, is that valuable to you now?
Very, yeah. I probably haven't coached that many players that were in similar circumstances as me, probably right. Because I'm in Arizona. Other players who are in similar circumstances as me nowadays in Arizona as well. It's like you're not playing ball right. anymore, Right. So, but when I do start to see somebody kind of falling off, it does help me. I know that I have significant influence over these athletes' life for a period of time. Like I don't coach as much now that I run the company as what I used to, but I knew back then that, you're around this person like five days a week, 6 days a week, a few hours at a time. And it's you, their parents, and their friends. And so it's like I knew that like I was a heavy influence on their environment, just like my friends were to me.
Right.
And when I could see that some kids were going through similar things with performance anxiety or like getting in trouble and stuff like that, then I knew that I had an opportunity to like actually like lead and try to
speak into their life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And try to change the outcome.
Wow, that's cool. And actually, it kind of ties in with one of my next questions is I've watched a lot of your stuff in preparation for you to come here, and I love your 15-minute kind of I talked to you about this, your kind of 15-minute kind of podcast stuff. I think you give a lot of knowledge on that. Some things I really appreciate. I agree with. And one of them was cool. I thought like you talked about that you used to train with all your athletes, like side by side with them. Yeah. And I thought that was a cool concept. Could you kind of like talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. It was hard, but I didn't know any other way to do it. So when I first started, remember, I wasn't charging. And so what had to happen was people would come in. And I was so obsessed about my own training that when they would come in, I had a morning crew and an evening crew. And in the morning, everybody trained with me. And so at this time, too, they weren't really paying. So I was like, if you can't keep up, you're kicked out. So the environment was really suited for like really dedicated high school athletes and like college and professional guys, and just because, I was in indie ball and stuff like that, like I did have some professional guys on the floor with me. Right. And my brother-in-law, he had some connects with NBA, so I was training a lot of like NBA basketball players at this time too. So it was like, if you couldn't actually like do the work and keep up with me, then that means you affected my training. I was still pretty selfish. So like you're out. Right. And I would just kick people out on a consistent, not the best business model, but I would just kick people out on a consistent basis. But what that did is it really formed a culture. And so eventually when it got to the point where like I couldn't work out with them anymore. And by the way, the evening crew would come in and just do the same workout, but I wouldn't train with them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would do like, some accessory movements with them for like my second workout of the day, but nothing crazy.
Yeah.
And, for that, I think what it did though is I carried that into OPP, and every once in a while when I would go into the facility, like I would still train side by side with them.
You jump in with them.
Yeah, but when I was in OPP, I was also working like 14 to 18 hours a day, like just miserable, doing everything myself with the marketing, the cleaning, the whole nine. So it couldn't continue, but it started that. And then all those athletes that I trained, that trained with me side by side, also funneled into OPP. And so they kept that culture going, and it's been pretty consistent since. So now my coaches even like train with the athletes side by side occasionally when they have time.
That's cool. I mean, you don't think about it as much, with coaches that coach teams, we always talk about culture, right? Culture of a team, of a team. But, culture of a facility is a real thing too.
Yeah, most people don't have it.
And most people don't have it. And that's incredibly important to run a successful facility.
100%. Like we have rules now where it's like you can't wear headphones. You're not on your phone.
I like that.
Yeah, like you got to like be present. Otherwise, because now our goal is to make an impact at the highest level of the game using our systems. And so like we can't do that if you're not present. Mm-hmm. If you don't actually get results, it doesn't really matter if you're paying us, you know?
Right.
So, like we're really, really heavy on that, because the moment that the culture changes and everybody's in there wearing their own headphones, basically doing remote training on the floor, like looking at their programs that people designed for them, and then they're off doing their own thing, it changes. So now the results are going to change. Yeah. And then I can't actually like say that this system works because it's like so-and-so is doing great, but so-and-so is also just kind of like, excuse my language, but like pussyfooting around, not really doing the work that they need to be able to do in that moment. So yeah, I think culture is very important, but most facilities now, they're so focused on revenue that the culture's gone.
You have one of your businesses is you help kind of teach facilities how to be profitable run. Is like an element like that a part of what you share with them?
Very big. Yeah. Now everybody can't have the same culture that we have.
Sure.
But they can, develop it based off of like their personal experiences in their life, and how they came to be the facility that they are now, right? Mm-hmm. And so basically what we do is we teach our coaches mission, vision, principles, and like how you can go about creating that for your company, so that way you have something to strive for while these athletes come in and train you. Because if it's just about money, you're going to lose. Right. Like it's not the same thing. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to lose, because eventually you'll make the money, and then you're going to be like, well, now what? There's going to be no next level to that. And so when we can teach them mission, vision, and principles within the company that they want to have, and they get really clear on the impact that they want to make, then they can really influence the culture heavily from that point on. Yeah. So
what are some of the biggest pitfalls you see from facilities when they, maybe a new facility, they're excited, they open up, they I mean, what are some of the biggest pitfalls you see?
Build it and they will come. That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a lie. To be very transparent with you, at my first facility, we had like 2,000 square foot of training space, and we were able to do like $500,000 a year in there just by myself. Yeah. And that's not me tooting my own horn, but that's strictly because of the environment. We were set up in like a ghetto location. The facility was trash. It was really hot in Arizona. We had everything working against us. I was a solopreneur, no front desk. We literally just got a front desk last week. Like,
really?
Yeah. Like no front desk, and people came because of the results and because of the culture. They didn't come because we had the nicest facility. They didn't come because of the TrackMan, the hit tracks, and all the stuff that we have now. They're not coming for that. And so I think now what facilities are doing is they're trying to copy what other people are doing in the space. Mm-hmm. They're trying to copy this data-driven culture instead of just creating something for themselves that they're really proud of, that they want to take and make an impact with the world. When you have that, it is easy to go to work every day. Like I'm excited to wake up at 2:30 in the morning and go to work. Yeah. And most facility owners at this point in time are not. Like they're burnt out, and they're having a really hard time paying the bills, and they're also having a really hard time growing their facility and growing their online training because they don't have that.
Right. So, and a lot of that too is they're just trading time for money
consistently.
Right? And there's only so much time in a day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that comes down to like what your offer is and your pricing structure and how you organize your time. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. What my advice for facility owners now is like get in the room with people who know way more than you. And who have either been successful at the thing that you are doing right now, and like pay them, because the sooner that you can get in the room with them, the sooner that you can learn from their pitfalls and their shortcomings and apply it to your own life. And at the time that I was coming up, I didn't have that. There was no like facility doing like what we're doing right now with our license program, like basically giving you plug and play systems and walking you through that process. That didn't exist. So I had to go out and pay. I mean, I've spent multiple six figures on mentors at this point. But I had to go out and pay all sorts of different coaches in all sorts of different sectors to try to just get one thing that could get me closer to making the impact that I want to make with my company. And I'm so glad that I did that. You know, every time, the first time you swipe your card on an investment like that, it's scary. Any kind of coach, it's scary. But then it's like you have to take your own advice. You're a coach. People are literally paying you to do the same thing. And you're not willing to go, you know, foot the bill and pay somebody to learn how to run your organization better. Like that doesn't make sense. You know, every coaches need coaches. And so I did that on a consistent basis. I do it still today. You know, I have 2 mentors right now that I paid a lot of money to help teach me, you know, all their pitfalls and what they learned so I could speed my process up.
That's awesome. That's just so true as far as, you know, that's what people do to you. You know what I mean? So, you know, don't think about it that way, but that's 100% true.
Yeah, and then you're mad because the kid won't make the investment in you, but it's like, dude, you don't even make investments in yourself.
Yeah,
you know?
That's so true. Now, I know a lot of people know you now, obviously, for hitting, I would say primarily, right? But, you know, you already talked a little bit about it, but, you know, I don't know if you started, but strength and conditioning was one of your main things early on, right? I mean, what are some of the things now that you've seen that, like, kids are lacking in the weight room?
Structure and organization, usually because they're stuck in like speed and agility programs. They're stuck in these little 2-week camps. And honestly, I think it comes from parents not knowing what they don't know, you know, not being educated on the subject. So what they'll do is they'll see that like their son's slow, or they'll see that he doesn't throw hard, and they'll be like, all right, I'm going to go fix this thing. And then it's just a Band-Aid when you go see an instructor for a lesson once in a while, or you go sign him up for a 2-week speed and agility course, or, you know, you go take him to a trainer at your local gym, but that you only see him once a week. It's like, that's not really how it works anymore. And there's so much information at your fingertips. You can figure that out. So it's usually that they just don't know what they don't know. And then it's also like unwilling to make the investment for long-term development. And so those are the 2 biggest things I think that kind of shoot people in the foot. And then when the kid wakes up when he's 16, 17, he's like, oh man, I'm behind. I wish I would have done this sooner. You know, we've trained thousands of athletes at this point, from youth all the way to the big leagues. And that's the one thing that we hear on a consistent basis over and over and over again, is that I wish I would have done this sooner. Not like, oh man, like I'm really glad that I started late. Like nobody says that, you know? So yeah.
What's the earliest age you would recommend for an athlete to start training in the gym?
So my daughter's 7 and she does that now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I mean, back in the days, like in Soviet Union time when they were running everything, and I got a lot of this from Louis Simmons' literature as well. It's like, generally how it would start is you would start training right around 7 to 9 years old, and you would go through like organized training, but just for general physical preparedness, which is like your general fitness. And so you would do that, and then you would also do gymnastics. You would do all sorts of sports all the way up until you were about 12, and then usually by 12 they would kind of delegate you towards something that you could succeed at, like in the Olympics, you know, and then they would kind of push you heavily towards that. In the U.S., we're so far behind that we usually don't start like weight training athletes until they're in high school. You know, like I talk to parents still to this day for OPP, and they're like, you know, I don't really want my son doing weightlifting. I'm like, how old is he? He's 13. I was like, what do you mean? You're 3 years behind now, you know, because there's still this like facade of like, well, weightlifting stunts their growth and it hurts. It's like, no, it doesn't. The science is clear. It's been out there for a while that it doesn't do anything like that. You
really?
know? So
is there a higher risk of injury with younger players getting in the gym earlier?
No, it just depends on your coach. You know, like if you have a coach who's well-versed and, you know, understands like basic program design and like can manage your frequency, volume, and intensity pretty well, like no. But it sucks when you only see a coach like once a week. It's like it's not real. Like you're willing to sign your kid up for baseball year round, but you have to remember that the engine fuels that, and when the engine lacks, like you're just gonna outrun your car. You know, like so the engine's gonna be built in the weight room, and it's gonna be built by actually taking the time to invest in their physical abilities, not just their skill 24/7.
From a practical standpoint, are there things that you would not do in the weight room with a younger player that you would do with an older player, or it's just more like what are some of those things, like I guess just from a practical standpoint?
The basics would be like once you press that button on intensity, so like maximal effort lifts is something that we do a lot that not a lot of people do. They're convinced it's going to get them hurt, but it doesn't. The science is also very clear on that. But like our high school, college, and pro guys, they max out pretty consistently. Granted, we are able to manage because they train with us on a consistent basis. Nobody sees us once a week. We're able to manage all their frequency, volume, and intensity, so it makes it easier for us to tap that button when we need to. A youth athlete doesn't need to tap that button yet. They don't even have the hormones yet to benefit from it significantly, and they don't have the hormones yet to even pack on lean mass. So not until they're like 13, 14.
Okay.
Right? And so our goal from like basically 11 to 14 is to prepare them for that stimulus when it comes, because you can accomplish so much just from progressive overload and structure and decent program design that you don't need to tap that button yet, because once you tap it, you can't go back. So like once you expose the athlete to that kind of a stimulus, they're going to need that stimulus on a more of a consistent basis in order to get the benefits from it, right? So I would say for youth athletes, it's like we pretty much stay away from 1 rep maxes, and we're just building the foundation. So that way when we do tap that button, they're in a very good position to just succeed from that. So it's a lot of technique, a lot of form, and then just the disciplinary factor of teaching them like, this is what it takes to succeed at the next level. So structure within that, having them come on a consistent basis. And then obviously the motivation at that age. Like I tell my coaches, like we provide motivation until they're 14. At 14, if you don't have the motivation to train, like you got 3 years, dude. So you're going to be out anyways, you know? But up until 14, like it's really important that they enjoy their training and that they are willing to like be excited to show up. And so at that point, like our coaches provide a heavy amount of motivation for those athletes to get them excited about the training, excited about the environment. But at 14 now, it's like, dude, this is a job. You know, like whether you like to believe it or not, like if you want to just have fun in high school, cool, great. We're probably not the place for you. But if you want to just have fun and not take it serious and not like accomplish your dreams of possibly going D1 or getting drafted, then yeah, just have fun and go train with your bros at like EOS. But if you're serious, then at 14, whether you like it or not, you have to train. Whether you're motivated or not, you have to show up. And so at that point, we don't provide the motivation anymore. We expect it.
Yeah. Where does the nutrition aspect of it play a part? Now I have a feeling I already know, because when we were chatting yesterday, you were talking about your kids and what you do for your kids. So I don't have to ask the age, but talk about that a little bit, because it's not just obviously the gym. You know what I mean? So
yeah. So I think the nutrition does play a part when you're younger. I think you can get away with a lot more when you're younger. When you're older, it's way more significant. And so we provide nutritional guidance and meal planning for our athletes just because we know that life gets busy and most people are still eating gas station food and fast food on the go 24/7, especially when you're in high school and you can drive now. Oh man, what the guys show up with at the facility after school, it's like, dude, what are you doing? You know, like that bag of Cheetos is not going to fuel you for this workout. So it's important, but I also know like where our expertise lies. So we put a professional in place for that. His name's Caleb Worsland. He's the director of nutrition for our company. And he comes in and he advises us on like what are the do's and don'ts and how to do this. And so, you know, that's not my expertise by any means. And I also pay him to just do all mine, you know, so he tells me what to eat, when I can't eat and stuff like that. So, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, what's neat about this podcast that we were talking about a little bit before. So this is our 12th one. You're really the first guest that I had on that I didn't really know beforehand. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like everyone that else has come on, like we've had relationship, friendship with beforehand. And kind of how we got to this was we had a friend of ours, Turner Ward, on the podcast. And, you know, I had him react to a video that was teaching HLP. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, we talked about this too. I thought he was fairly gracious. I knew where he stood. I thought he was fairly gracious with his response, but, you know, it didn't matter to anyone else. Everyone else didn't think it was gracious. So there was a lot of back and forth going on. And so I just thought it was only fair to have someone on that was on the other side of the spectrum of the teaching philosophy, and have them an opportunity to share their side, you know, because Turner had an opportunity to share his. And, you know, one of the things that I was looking for, again, to give you your flowers with it, was trying to find someone that I thought I could have a good faith conversation with, you know, and, you know, and not get defensive or whatever, you know what I mean? And I was struggling. I came across stuff and I thought you were the perfect fit. So if we could kind of get into that a little bit, could you start with maybe giving me the background or the origins of HLP?
Yeah.
Before
Okay.
you kind of get into the details of HLP, I guess.
So I don't know if I can discuss heavily the backgrounds of it. I think that's
Okay.
more Richard. But I can tell you about my experience.
Okay, that's fine.
And so I was actually training at a facility that everybody knows, Driveline Baseball,
Yep.
back in the day when I was chasing my pro career. And I think I was just really annoying at that time. Remember, I was still deep in the weeds, dude. Like I'm researching 24/7, just trying to find the next hack. And, I was also the guy that would change my stance like 3 times in a game. And I would just, I was obsessed. And so I think at one point I kind of annoyed, the director of hitting at that time. I'm not going to say any names, and we were talking like we did a lot like after our sessions. And he was like, you know what? Have you ever seen this guy, Richard? And I was like, no. Who's that? Teacher man, go look him up. So he showed me his Instagram, and I went, or maybe his Twitter or something like that. And so then I just dove deep on it, and I started looking at it. My first reaction to it was like, this is stupid. These drills are ridiculous. But then I started thinking deeper about it, and I was like, well, the scientific theory basically says that you have to test anything and everything, develop a hypothesis, keep what actually works and rule out what doesn't. And that's like what real scientific theory actually takes. And so if I'm in this person that's obsessed about this, and those are my values and how I go about this process, then I should probably do that. But I was like, man, I can't get past how stupid this stuff looks. And it's just perspective, right? It's how I grew up. It's how I was raised. It's my worldview that I had. And I know that that's how everybody sees this, So when Ward was on here and he was talking about it, that's his perspective. That's based off his experiences. And so there's no shame against that. That's, I'm sure he's gotten results with other hitters doing things his way. And so it's like when you have that kind of bias towards like your perspective or your worldview on what the swing actually is, it's really hard to change it, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're open to actual scientific theory, and then it becomes a little bit easier to like accept new information and be willing to change. So what I did is I related it to my throwing. Like when I developed my throwing, I used a lot of the drills that Driveline created back in the day, and I used their system for organization and structure with it. And I remember the constraint drills being pretty stupid. I thought they were weird, And I remember this thing, backwards chaining and chucking, which is basically like where you start at the end of the throw and then you kind of work your way back. And, I started applying the skill acquisition stuff to my throw, and I took off with my throwing velo. Like I started throwing harder than I ever have. And, keep in mind, I was also like managing my weight training volume really well and stuff like that. And so that played a significant role. But I related it to that. And I was like, okay, if that worked and I was willing to do that, why wouldn't I be willing to do this? So I just started trying it. I started trying it on my own, and then I started messaging Richard back and forth. And this was before like he really blew up and took off with Judge in like 17, so he had time, And so I just kind of like pieced it together. Now I wasn't very good at it at all. Like I started grasping concepts of it. This was really foreign to me, turning the barrel rearward, getting on plane sooner. Very, very weird for me, but I was already kind of in this, the last year, kind of going the Josh Donaldson approach, which was like heavy shoulders and elbows and kind of remove the hands out of the equation and be mostly arms. But that didn't really work out for me either. I was really inconsistent. I was more inconsistent with that. And I always hit the ball hard, so it wasn't like I needed more bat speed and exit velo. It was really like the efficiency of the technique. And also, like, performance anxiety was massive. So I could have been, by the way, I could have had, like, the best swing in the world. I still think I would have been the average 250 hitter, just because, like, that was prevalent in my game at this time in my life, right?
Yeah, right.
So, anyways, I started doing that, and I kind of got a grasp of the rear leg my last year in indie ball. And I ended up, like, going into the All-Star break, and it was like the best season I've ever had, and I was the MVP of the All-Star game. I was like one of the best hitters on the team, and then I got traded right after the All-Star break. I went in to, this is like a side story, but I went into the office, and my owner of the team was drunk, and he was like, hey, I'm going to trade you for a couple players. And I was like, bro, like I'm the best hitter on the team. I love my team. Like this is the first time I've ever done good in my life. Like why? So I go over to this new team, and the coach hates my swing, and he wants me to change everything. And, it was a miserable existence. For the next few months, I fell off. Like, great. I lost like 100 points on my batting average. It was terrible. I suffered with a lot of that performance anxiety. It came right back, when I started putting pressure on myself. So, anyways, what I did when I came home, though, is I started testing a lot of the HLP stuff with all these clients that I had that I was training for free. And over time, I started to figure it out a lot more. Like, I started getting a lot better at teaching it, because I think in order to figure it out, too, you have to be willing to swing a bat. And so because I was willing to go to the facility 2 hours early, even though I had a 12-hour day in front of me, and try to hit, and try to figure it out. Then I could relay that information over to my clients and try to get them to hit and try to get them to figure it out. And at first we weren't very good, just like with anything. But over time it started getting progressively better. And I started seeing these athletes who were like no names, go D1, and these athletes who really didn't have like a future in the game, like start actually like creating a future for themselves. Regardless if they went D1 or not, these are guys who like maybe had the physical ability to play, but they couldn't actually like play in college. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it started picking up for them. And I was like, man, I really feel like this is going to be the way, Mm-hmm. And so, just following like the scientific theory, being willing to test, trial and error for a long period of time with a lot of athletes, I realized like right now, and I still have this opinion today, otherwise we wouldn't teach it, but I believe that it's the best technique in the world for hitting. And that's not like a biased opinion either. Like we've done this with thousands of athletes at this point. So, back then, before I even said like, hey, we do HLP, I was just testing. I tested everything, and so it wasn't until I really figured out that it really started to work. I loved the idea of it. I was able to develop a complete system around it for like youth, high school, collegiate, professional athletes, and we developed program designs around it, the whole nine. And once I did that, I was like, man, this is definitely the way. But with that being said, if anybody ever created something better, or if we end up improving it or finding some new information out there because we consistently apply the scientific theory to everything that we're doing, if that existed, we would do that. So it's not like I'm married to HLP and I'm just going to die with it. It's more like this is amazing for where we're at, but we're always trying to consistently improve upon it, if that makes sense.
No, that's cool. That's a cool perspective. So let's break down, what is it? What is HLP?
Yeah, so HLP is basically, from my experience, it is the understanding of actually launch quickness. So launch quickness is the time between your decision to launch and the actual launch of your swing. And so if you can basically give a hitter more time to be able to decide, then he's going to make better decisions at the plate, right? He's going to be able to become a more efficient hitter just because he'll have more time to actually make his decisions in order to swing. Technically, in my opinion, what happens right now is hitters, because their swing or their technique doesn't allow them to have very good launch quickness, meaning that their time between their decision to launch and the actual launch of their swing is really long, that they struggle because of the technique. Okay. Now, there is a lot of other stuff that can make you a good hitter or a bad hitter, and a lot of it's upstairs, and I realize that because that's something that I struggle with in my career. But as far as technique goes, if I'm going to fail, I want to fail because of what's going on up here, because of my decisions that I made. I don't want to fail because my technique doesn't allow me to succeed against who I'm going against, against that pitcher. I want to fail just because like he got me, like he won, he fooled me, right? I don't want to fail just because my technique, like I saw the pitch, it was right there, everything was great, but my technique didn't allow me to get my barrel on plane on time, right? And so really there's two pivot points in the swing. There's the hand pivot where you turn the barrel rearward, which is the big thing that people don't like, right? And then there's the rear leg pivot point right here around the rear hip socket that also basically turns you and speeds the bat up as you launch, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think I'm following.
And so those are the two pivot points, and the main emphasis though is to improve somebody's launch quickness, just so they have more time to hit. Now, you still have to have physical ability. That's why we prioritize the weight room with our high level pattern, development. And the physical ability for us is developed in the weight room. We separate skill from physical ability, so we don't try to train bat speed and exit velocity and stuff like that in the cage. We think that does more damage than good, because I experimented with that process for a long period of time. I actually paid people to teach me that process for a long period of time as well. And it didn't work out for me. I went from being able to hit the ball, 100 to 105, and it didn't really matter. Right. And so for me, it was like, well, and maybe that's a biased approach, but I also tested that with other athletes who I was training for free at the time as well. And I didn't see efficiency pick up. I didn't see efficiency pick up until I was able to actually teach people how to buy more time. And the moment that I saw that, I was like, oh, you can take like a bad hitter, give him more time to hit. Even if he doesn't have the top half and the pivot point really well, buy him more time with his rear leg, and he can become a little bit better. You could take a good hitter, and he can become even better if you buy him more time. And so that was like the process. That was like a long-winded answer.
No, that's good. Yours. So, I guess, how does the rear leg, those two pivot points that you were describing, how does that give the player more time? Could you explain that?
Yeah. So essentially,
I know it's tough. I know it's tough because we're sitting down, and I understand it's hard for but
let's talk about the opposite of that first. Okay. So generally, what happens is most hitters are under the conclusion that they want to gain momentum. They want to hit the ball out. We know that that's what gets you paid is doubles and home runs. You got to be able to affect the lineup at the next level if you want to be seen, right? So that's what people are chasing now. Unfortunately, when that is your only goal and motivation, what I think happens, and this is what happened to me, and I've seen this happen to a lot of players, is there's too much forward momentum. So you usually you're forced to make decisions sooner than you want because you're going towards the ball. You don't have the ability to quote unquote stay back, which is like what everybody's trying to do, right? And because you lack that ability, if it ends up fooling you and it's off speed, you don't have anything being able to keep you back in order to actually win the game. So you're already committed to a pitch before it's actually like gets to the point where you can swing. Does that kind of bring it home?
Yeah.
So that's like that's why the rear leg is so important, is because of that aspect. But then the hand pivot is so important because usually what happens when you do slip the rear leg is next is like the elbow slot and then a push across your body, which tends to make your bat path a little bit more east-west or too flat through the zone, which causes a lot more mishits, because ideally, like statistically, we want the bat angle a little bit more vertical, so that way you can just be on plane with these balls a lot sooner because it's coming at a downhill trajectory, right? So it just kind of makes sense as far as like basics physics are concerned. And so when the hitter can turn the barrel rearward behind them, it just speeds up how fast they're actually able to get their barrel back behind them. When the rear leg can speed the barrel up through the zone, that's where all the power comes from. So this is like pure technique and efficiency to get the barrel behind you, but the rear leg speeds it up and takes you through. So when you see guys do drills where, like I posted a video that got, I think it's at like 2 million views now, where I had all the pro guys like hitting this pool noodle behind them, right?
Yeah.
Did you see that one?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's fun. Yeah. And they're hitting this pool noodle behind them, and that's just the feeling. So it's a constraint drill to exaggerate, like this is what you're trying to do when you swing. Now, when they swing, you don't see that, right? Because the rear leg at the same time that you're doing this, there's a lot to this, and it's hard to explain.
Yeah, no, I know.
Contextually in a chair, right? But when the rear leg actually turns you, then the barrel's already starting to speed up behind you. All this is happening at the same time, the moment that you decide to swing, which improves your launch quickness. Because now I can make my decision a little bit later. I can see the ball a little bit longer because I have the ability to stay back. I don't have forward momentum taking me over. And because right when I decide to swing, I can go like this and my rear leg turns me, the barrel and the rear leg sync up in a way where now it's really fast, right? And so I think that what happens now, though, is people will see those constraint drills, and they'll be like, you don't do that in the game. And it's like, well, duh, because I'm exaggerating one aspect of the swing that when you put it all together, it creates the outcome, And so
I agree. I agree with that concept with drills in general. And actually, and I've told you this already.
Yeah.
You and I, we disagree on hitting philosophy, and I'm okay with that, and you're okay with that.
Perfectly fine with that.
So, I was raised by an old school hitting guy. So again, you know where I stand pretty much on that. Although we did talk a little bit. I do think there are elements, and the more I talk, there are elements that I do agree with. The concepts I agree with. Maybe how we get there is a little bit different, but I'm okay with that.
Well, and that always comes back to perspective too, right?
Right.
And so a big thing that I think is important for people to know is like, do I think HLP is for everyone? Technically, yes, but at the same time, no. And the reason why I say that is because I think it takes a significant amount of pain to actually go towards this technique. Okay, because I believe that we all make decisions based off of pain. So like, I ate this morning because there was pain in my belly, and it was like I wanted to go fill that void, so I went and put food in my stomach because I had a significant amount of pain. People go and they buy things they can't afford because they have pain based off like status, right? So they'll go out and buy cars that they can't afford and houses they can't afford and things like that because they want to appear a certain way to people, and so there's levels of pain there that you're always trying to fill. Your body's always trying to get back to homeostasis no matter what you do. And so generally the people who do adapt HLP, it's usually because they're on their last leg. And they have so much pain going on right now. Like that's why I did it.
Right.
That's why all the pro guys that I've worked with have done it. We're not getting guys who are MLB all-stars like, hey, I'm going to come do that.
Right.
We don't get them until they're in pain.
Right.
And the reason why is because it's so foreign to everything that they've already been taught, and their perspective on it is the same of everyone else, is the same that mine was before I found it, that this is the way that you hit. You hit down, you swing like straight down, you get the front foot down early, and it's like these are all concepts that, maybe they have helped people. I don't know. They didn't really help me that much. But when you have some success with that, it's really hard to then be like, okay, I'm just going to go try out HLP just because like I'm already successful. Like I'm already doing well, But then when you have enough pain where you're like, man, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my scholarship. I'm not going to play in high school. Then it's like, well, this thing's getting pretty big. Maybe I try this, And so that's when I think that it is for you, because now you're going to actually have enough pain to stick it through.
Yeah.
When you don't have enough pain to stick it through, you're just going to try to hop in, see if it works for the first month, and then hop out.
Yeah.
But when you have enough pain in your career and in your life where you're like, I really need this, then you're going to be willing to go all in.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's a really good. It's a great point too, as just as a general point, and that was going to be one of my questions for you too. Is that like, do you think it's for everyone? Or and we could even go even deeper onto the type of hitter you are, the type of skill set you have. Yeah. A real quick guy that steals bases, that's maybe isn't trying to hit the ball over the fence every single swing versus not. And I want to get your opinion on some of those things. But because my always big perspective, even when I was doing a lot of hitting instruction, when I had the facility and stuff, is I hated cookie cutting. Like one size fits all. Like it just was never, that was never my thing. And I remember there was one gentleman that I had, a high school kid, and he was so heavy on his front side, and he swung a very steep swing plane.
Yeah.
And we tried a bunch of different drills, different things to get him to stay back, and just we couldn't get anything. And when I sold the facility, he ended up going somewhere where it teaches some HLP stuff. And I was like, and I remember thinking to myself, that's going to be great for him. Like that kid needs that, in my opinion. Like he needs those types of drills, maybe over the top, and like he needed it. I thought, and I thought it was perfect for him.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, do you ever see a scenario where you feel that way in the other direction?
No, and the reason why is because, and maybe there's obviously like I've already talked about, like we all have our biases.
Yeah.
And I think that for athletes who are like smaller, they're the fast kids on the team. Here's the thing. What tends to happen is these younger athletes, they get told that, and then they buy into it.
Sure.
And so their environment heavily affects how they think about themselves and how they view their game. And then it heavily affects how their parents talk to them. And then their parents tell them like, hey, he's not that kind of a hitter. And it's like, well, he's not because you tell him that he's not, and he believes that he's not. And so he's never going to try to adapt something that's going to possibly be able to get the ball in the air more.
Right.
And it's like, you can be 5'8" and hit tanks, like you can be a little guy and hit the ball really hard. And that's where I think that it's more so that instead of trying to adapt to this philosophy that you have of yourself right now, it's like try to improve to become the best that you can. And when you do that, what gets you paid. It's home runs and doubles and being able to put runs on the board. And so if it was me and I was the fast kid and I was known as the small, skinny, like I'm only going to get on base, I have to know that eventually, like, scouts are not really looking for that person anymore. Like it's the name of the game, And it's like, I'm not saying it's not valuable. It's definitely valuable. If you're fast, awesome, great. But you're only going to get better if you get drastically stronger and you improve your physical abilities. And if you can hit the ball in the air and affect the game with one swing of the bat, you're only going to be more valuable. So it's like, in my opinion, it is for everyone, but I don't think it's for everyone based off of where you're at mentally in your game right now. So like if you don't have enough pain, like I discussed earlier, to make a change and actually see it through, then you're going to program hop wherever you go anyways. So it's probably not going to be good to do this because you got to go all in. You can't like, I think the worst thing that somebody could do with HLP is only take bits and pieces of it and try to apply it to athletes, because that's when you see the worst results, because they're getting mixed coaching from everybody. There's too many hands in the cookie jar. And now they're trying to adapt 7 different philosophies instead of 1. And then when they make mistakes, they don't know how to fix it because there's no system in place. And so that's why we've been heavily dependent on systems, heavily dependent on trying to figure out, like, how can we get this athlete to maximize their potential with where they're at right now and get them to the next level? And that usually requires a significant amount of sacrifice on their end and a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so it's not for everyone if you're looking to do something quick in 30 days.
So you think that, like, a lot of these guys that are in the bigs that have had success, and I know, Richard uses Barry Bonds' example a lot, right? Yeah. Now we know what Barry Bonds thought. He didn't think HLP, but according to Richard, obviously,
wrong, right?
but like Richard, slows down video and shows, what he's talking about, right?
Yep.
Do you think that, like, even if guys that train HLP, there's like, so like you have the two ends of the spectrum, right? You got the swing down guy and you got HLP on this side. And, you know, the basics of getting on plane early, staying through the ball, you know, being quick to the ball, whether that be launch quickness or some guy thinking his hands more, whatever it may be, right? It's somewhere in the middle here. And some guys need this to get here and some guys need this to get here. And it's, I mean, it's a philosophy, right? You know, a philosophy is a thought. It's how we think. Right. So, do you think there's certain people that need to think that down? Like a Barry Bonds, obviously was pretty successful, even if he didn't swing down. You know, which I agree, he didn't swing down. So, but he thought swing down,
right?
And he was very successful.
Sure.
So, like, do you think there are, you know, if everyone were to go the HLP thought process, would we get the uppercut, the bad end of that? Just like when everyone thinks swing down, we do get the swing down, the steep stuff, right? Do you think if it was ever so much on one side or the other, we would get the wrong side?
Of course, but I think it's just the quality of the coaching at that point and the system that you have in play. You know, most hitting coaches, to be very honest and very transparent with you, they don't have a system, and they don't have a reason for why they make decisions besides they see something in the moment, they're like, I'm going to fix that thing. But when you have a system that you can rely on, knowing that everything in the swing has whatever that you're looking at right now, probably what preceded it in the mechanics has caused that outcome to happen, right? So how they finish. Well, how they finish isn't something that you really want to focus on. It's going to be more so how they launched. And then if the launch is off, well, how did they load? And so it's like if you have a system where you can backtrack and actually pinpoint the issue, then you actually have something you can rely on there. And then as far as like feels in the moment, that heavily just comes down to the quality of the coach in the moment, relying on the system. So that way you can actually trial test it and see if like your philosophy is correct or not. The system basically allows you how you make decisions, but cueing in the moment is like the quality of the coach and their experience that they have playing the game and working with tons and tons and tons of hitters, right? So the coach who's coached for 10 years, he's going to have a very different way of relaying information to somebody to get them to grasp the talk. It doesn't change the system though. It doesn't change the underlying philosophy of the positions that you're trying to get into or like the method, not philosophy, of what you're trying to do, but it does change how you distribute that information. And that, to me, is strictly based off the quality of the coach. But when you have a system that you can rely on for that, and it's not just hunches and opinions, it's like, wow, this is like, the launch is off because the direction at which he launches is off, and I can track that down to this, and then we can go back to video and just hammer this one part. That's something reliable that you can focus on, which right now, like hitting isn't that way. Hitting's like, well, I feel like I'm doing this. I'm top spinning. I'm, flying out. So like, I'm just going to go try to fix X, Y, Z, or I'm just going to try to hit top half, bottom half. It's like, okay, cool. But those are usually just band-aids in the moment. And it's not like relying on something very concrete in order to trial test and like see like, how do I prevent this from happening consistently in the future? If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. Do you think guys that like I was looking at some different guys. Obviously, there are guys in the big leagues that don't, even in practice, don't do HLP, right? Like more on the front side. They're moving a lot, really forward.
And then in the game, you see them, and it's
totally
different, right?
And even sometimes in the game, like they do it in games. I mean, I think of a guy he came to my head, like Frank Thomas was. I don't know if you've ever seen his swing, but
I can't remember. I know Frank Thomas.
I've
seen it.
Obviously, he was a big dude, but really strong. But I mean, he used to be really aggressive towards the ball. Obviously, the way I was always brought up, and I'm curious to get your opinion on, because when you were talking about the back leg and staying back or behind the ball, obviously I agree with a lot of that. The way, I guess the other side was that we get that from bracing up on the front leg, you know what I mean, and hitting behind the front leg, still having that attack forward, but then being able to stop. So I do want to get your kind of the other side of that. But like a guy like Frank Thomas, I mean, like his back leg was off the ground. I mean, like almost every single, every single bomb. You know what I mean? Like a guy like that, could he have been, in your opinion, would he be a better hitter if he would have, applied the HLP hitting philosophy?
I see stuff that's so hard to answer.
I know that's an impossible question.
I would say there's something to that though, with the front leg being braced like that and hitting against it. I actually don't think high level hitters hit against the front leg. Okay. And so the reason why I don't think that is because I think it takes too much time to close the gap between hips and shoulders when that does happen. Okay, so let me break this down a little bit more easy, so that way it's digestible for the audience. But when the hitter creates a significant amount of hip-shoulder separation, have you ever seen those videos where it's like the stretch happens from the front leg to that, right?
the rubber band.
Rubber band.
Yeah, the rubber band.
Our rubber band, in my opinion, is like on the back side of our body. So when we're loading, we actually feel a stretch up the back, not really like against the front. And so when that is your stretching mechanism, though, it's similar to a pitcher. A pitcher can maximize hip-shoulder separation because it's they're in control of time.
Right.
They don't have a timing window that they have to abide by. Now with the pitch clock, they have to rush, but they don't have a timing window once they start that they have to abide by. It's more about sequencing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can maximize hip-shoulder separation and close that gap very fast. The larger hip-shoulder separation that a hitter has, it requires more time to close that gap. Okay?
Sure.
Could you hit
Makes
the ball
sense.
harder? Probably.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that you're going to be as efficient or buy yourself more time for launch quickness. So make the decision and be able to get on plane as fast as possible. So I would say that when you use the front leg to brace, generally what's happening is you're also creating more hip-shoulder separation because the barrel still has to come back. The barrel's still back as that front foot really plants hard into the ground. And so now we're getting into the nuances as well. What do you think the front foot, when you say front foot down, how down is it? Is it just touching, or is it actually like bracing, bearing significant load, and then the hitter's closing the gaps from there? And so I think that you can hit a bunch of different ways.
Sure.
And you can have success a bunch of different ways. Look at Bryce Harper when he came up in the game to now.
Oh, yeah.
There's a significant change that
Huge
has happened,
difference.
right? And so, and he was still an amazing, best hitter in the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Best hitter in the world at one point when he was younger, swinging hard against the front foot, tons of hip-shoulder separation.
Yeah. Probably one of the most I've ever seen in my life, honestly.
Yeah, maybe
is
genetic
how-
anomaly,
yeah.
right? But amazing skill and amazing bat-to-ball skills, and he was able to do that. So I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying most of us aren't Bryce Harper.
Right.
And so in order to be as efficient as possible, my understanding, my belief right now is that we don't want to create a significant amount of hip-shoulder separation.
Okay.
And that we want to be able to launch before the front foot actually begins to bear a significant amount of weight. Touching, fine. Like kind of grounded,
Heel down.
okay. But when the heel is down significantly hard, the heel can actually be down before it's planted
Sure.
hard. And like you can see, like when you watch a hitter hit with their shorts off, like in the facility, you can see like when their muscles tense in slow motion
Yeah.
video, right? Like
Yeah.
when that happens, now the front leg is actually bearing weight.
Yeah.
So for us, we don't teach anything with the front foot at all. Our goal is to just launch from the rear leg and teach us how to do that, because the front foot's going to do whatever it needs to do when it does it, but it's not like a teaching point for us that we're trying to maximize, touch the ground, make sure that it's heavy planted, and then hit against it. Because in our belief, it's going to take too long for you to actually get your swing off, for you to be able to launch. So now you're relying on, now I have to get the front foot down completely, bear load, create that stretch with hip-shoulder separation, then I can launch.
Yeah.
But when you're seeing 95 and 100 and you're not very good already, like you're not Bryce Harper, you're not genetically gifted more than other people, you need as much time as humanly possible to make that decision. And so for us, it's like we'd rather develop the physical ability so you can hit the ball really hard, you're really, really strong, and brutally explosive with explosive strength. And when you have those abilities plus an efficient technique, I think that's where the money's made. You know, it's a shame that Aaron Judge is 6'7", 280 pounds, because I think that if it would have been Caleb Durbin, who's going off right now, if he would have been first, it would have been a different story. You know, Kerry Carpenter, he's not 6'7". So all these guys that are having success with it right now, people don't talk about them. They talk about Judge and how it's like, well, he's 6'7", 280. I mean, Judge could do anything and he'd be successful. Well, not really, because he tried the other way and it didn't work that well.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I don't know if that really answered your question.
No, it does. And that's kind of, again, that goes back to my philosophy, is that I think different things for different people, right?
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like Judge did try. I mean, you look at Judge's swing beforehand, and it was
drastically different,
yeah,
right?
drastically different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you got to
And it's not like he was a bad hitter. Look at where he got drafted.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due, I believe.
Yeah.
So I do think that obviously it's working. It's working
Yeah.
for him. You know what I mean? For sure. You know what I mean? And I guess the other side is just like, man, it has worked so well for so many other people over time the other way. I guess that would be just, now they didn't have the opportunity to try it this way, so that would be the counter argument.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
perspective and worldview,
So
right?
that would be,
Yeah.
so I understand there's that. I guess that's the hard thing I have to get over is how many people have been successful with the other philosophy, I guess, over time.
Yeah.
Over time.
Yeah.
And the other one is with the back leg is just watching, again, from the fans' perspective. It does seem like a lot of guys have that back leg come off the ground at contact point, and you would say that's not.
It's
that's
actually
not optimal.
I would say look back. So we have this thing called the reversal system, where everything that happens in the swing is actually predetermined by what happened before it. And so
Okay.
when you look at like that back leg coming off, did it come off the ground because the front foot planted extremely hard and then they launched, or did they launch and then the front foot came down extremely hard and then the back foot came off the ground? So a lot of these scissor videos that people are seeing right now, they actually launched before the front foot came in contact, which the launch is the moment the barrel actually starts to turn on plane. The moment that they decide to swing, you'll see Richard calls it the missing frames, right? Which is like, not a lot of people understand what that is, but that's the moment that the barrel actually starts to turn. You don't see it in like extremely advanced like cameras like these. You wouldn't be able to see it in slow-mo, right? Okay. Because all you're seeing is the barrel like moving with the body as you turn. But when the camera's a little bit older and you can see those missing frames, that's where you can kind of see the barrel start to blur. Like he's decided at this moment, I'm going to turn the barrel. Like I'm going to swing is what his decision actually is. And then the barrel starts to turn. And it's like sometimes that happens and then you see the front foot brace because it's just doing what it needs to do. And they're actually launching from the rear leg at that point. You know, like Dustin Pedroia was a really good example of that. He had a massive forward move, but he was still able to launch from the rear leg, actually like turning the pelvis open into front foot plant rather than front foot plant, then massive hip shoulder separation, then pelvis turn.
Yeah, he used to. I mean, he also stepped in the bucket like every single swing, didn't he? He was like,
right?
you know,
So
he really.
That's
he
the
wasn't
thing. But if you see his swing and you see that back foot come off the ground, you're like, oh, he's doing it, and it's like, well, did he really? You know.
Yeah.
So I would say challenge the thought, challenge the idea by zooming back. Just a little bit and see. Now, some people do scissor and some people practice that in their training and some people have success with it. I'm not saying that it's technically wrong. I just believe that HLP, the technique of launching from the rear leg, is the best technique out there. It's the more optimal technique in order to like teach somebody how to become efficient and get on plane sooner.
That's fair. You know? That's fair. The other one was like we were talking about getting on plane, which I 100% agree on getting on plane early.
Yeah.
Always, that was something that my dad always, stressed at a young age. Now, even though he grew up being taught swing down,
by the way, because in our generation that wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
it was clip it and try to get backspin.
Get backspin. Yeah. He always thought that was a ridiculous concept. He's like, and so like I appreciate. So again, I have a little, even though he's an old school guy, a little different perspective. It was always like, man, it just makes most sense to get the bat on plane with the ball, keep it there as long as you can, gives you a chance. If your timing's a little bit off, you have a better shot at hitting a line drive.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it. Very simple, basic hitting, philosophy, I guess. But is another way besides, the snap or whatever, right? It's called a snap with the rear return or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is sometimes getting the bat on plane, couldn't that be dictated also by your hip hinge? As far as like guys that are more upright, like here, you really have to be intentional with getting there. When a guy that's a little bit more hip hinged over the plate, it's almost naturally is in that slot as you start to rotate. Is there anything to that?
I would challenge that idea a little bit. Not saying that you're wrong, but what I would say is we actually don't teach anybody to hinge at the hips. So our goal here is to try to get the pelvis to kind of coil over that ball of the femur. So try to take the hips over the rear leg. And basically what happens is like the femur actually creates like internal rotation in the hip socket right in here. So you're kind of winding that up as you stretch up the back. I know I'm on camera sitting in a seat, okay? But it's like basically that's the goal there. And then as the ball starts to come into play, the hitter has his sense of readiness already, and the ball starts to come into play at pitch release. He's ready to swing at pitch release, but things happen during that time where he's preparing to swing. And so you'll start to see hitters kind of go like this and go down, and they're just prepping in that fashion, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't teach like a pre-hinge or sit in your heel or anything like that, because that's not really a coil in the hip socket. That's actually just like bottoming out like a squat almost. So think about the difference between like if you stood up on one leg and wound yourself up, there would be a different feeling there inside of your hip than if you just sit on one leg and squatted down. Mm-hmm. And I think most hitters are squatting down, but when you squat down, there's nothing to uncoil. So the way to get out of it is to kind of fly forward. And so now you're pushing like lateral force into the ground. You're going forward to swing, which causes the momentum and hip shift and stuff like that. And then the second part to that I would challenge is posture. I don't think posture is something that actually needs to be focused on, like posture over the plate, because all of that is already going to be determined, in my opinion, from what we've done, is by how he's loading and how he's launching. So the moment at launch, how he launches is going to heavily determine his posture over the plate. But it's not something that, in my opinion, should be controlled or should be focused on in training, right? Because if I focus on posture and how he looks over the plate, that means I'm going to be focusing on an action that is heavily influenced by what happened before it. And so it's like, does that make common sense, right? To like focus on this action, even though I know that the launch is actually going to determine his posture over the plate. And so then for us, it's like, no, we got to take it back a bit, right?
Yeah.
And then focus on the quality of his launch and how he's launching, the direction at the moment he decides to swing, the direction of his launch, and focus on that as opposed to like how he looks at contact or after contact. Like for us, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause if you go back in the day, like again, probably when my dad was playing, even into the 90s, probably. I mean, most batting stances were very over the plate. Mm-hmm. Obviously that's changed in the 2000s. You guys were more upright.
Yeah.
But I mean, majority of the history of baseball, guys were very much standing here with hinged at the hip, upper body, staying over the plate. Mm-hmm. And you think people moved away from it because of what you're saying?
I don't think people moved away from it. I think people just naturally wanted to be more comfortable before the pitch got there. So it's like, I think the only thing that we focus on at that phase. So for us, there's 3 phases to the swing. There's the readiness phase, which is what we're talking about right now. Yep. The loading phase, which is how you're prepping to launch, and then the launch phase. Everything after the launch doesn't matter. Like you can't control what happens after you've already decided to swing. It's going to happen, And so we train the swing based off those 3 phases. And so I think what happens is people may have got away from that to try to focus on their feeling before the actual pitches come. And so that just comes from comfort, and the ideology of like, well, you have to sit a certain way over. That's probably kind of shifted out. Not that many coaches are like teaching like set up with your chest over the plate now before he throws, right? They're more focused on like posture at contact, which we don't focus on. But I think that has just kind of like, I don't think HLP changed that. I think people just
I think that definitely changed beforehand. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I was going to ask you something. You said something that I wanted to kind of follow up on because I had a question on it. I can't think of what it was. Oh no, actually, so you talk about the 3 phases. That launch phase. Do you include extension in that phase? Nope. Does HLP have zero thought of extension? What can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's not a massive focus for us. I don't think that focusing on extension through the ball, I don't think that really impacts ball flight at all. What's going to impact ball flight is how you approach the ball, not what happens after you hit the ball. So like your bat consistently going like this after you make contact for a split millisecond in time and the ball's already gone, I don't think you doing anything like this, is going to benefit you at all. Now, I will say that having the ability to be on plane behind the plate and in front of the plate is a good skill, because if you are fooled and you release your arms because you realize that it's slower than normal, like you anticipate 95, but it ends up dropping off at 85, but you have the ability to release your arms and adjust naturally and like extend when you hit it, cool, right? But that's more of like, you now have the ability, in my opinion, to actually do that when you learn how to actually stay back and when you learn how to control your load. That is a much harder ability to actually have when you've already launched forward, made the decision that it's going to be fast, and then, now it's slow, your butt flies out, and then you push your arms just to try to like save a hit. And maybe you can, but that's like your B, C, D swing, and we only really want to train like the A swing that you have to put you in the best position to succeed. So I think that you can try to have your A swing on every single pitch, and you don't have to have like a B, C, D swing in order to do it. So that's a long-winded answer of me saying I don't think extension is as important as people make it seem, and I think sometimes when you focus on extension, because it's a byproduct of everything that's happened before it, when you focus on it, a lot of people just focus on pushing the barrel, which makes, nobody wants to actually push the barrel. Right. Like even people who hate HLP, they're like, I don't want to push the barrel.
Sure.
They get that concept, right? And so sometimes you take like a younger athlete, high school, college athlete, even a professional, and you're working with them and you're like, let's focus on extension through the ball. And then you do all these drills that prioritizes literally just pushing your arms. Very hard to not get that outcome of pushing your arms through the zone, right?
Right.
And so for us, it's just not like a big focus.
A big focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of my comments to that would be a lot of times the extension is, the direction of that. Maybe you would say the direction of the launch, right? Because that's where, that gives you a little more time because things aren't perfect when you swing at a ball, and we have changeups and we have things that are breaking and all these different stuff. So it gives you that more room, but the direction of it is, I always found it to be incredibly important to make sure the direction of your extension is important.
That's really good. That's a really good topic, because a lot of people are convinced that direction is what happens at contact and through contact. I don't think that's direction at all. I'm actually convinced that direction happens the moment that you turn the barrel, the moment that you swing. So it's like, I want to feel like I can inside out every ball the moment that I swing. I don't want to have to think to myself when he's throwing 95, a cutter on the black, that now I'm going to have direction towards second base. You know, I want to be able to just do this naturally and just have the feeling that every swing that I take is going to be out from my body towards the opposite field, regardless if it's inside or not. I want to feel like at launch I have that ability, and I think when you have that ability, it affects your direction. So that's when we're turning the barrel, we want to feel like the barrel's actually turning like north-south towards the opposite field. The moment that we swing, you don't see that when it's on the black inside, but having that ability keeps you safe when it is outside and inside and you don't know where it's going. And then having the ability to actually stay back, now that gives you the opportunity that if you realize it's slow, you can release your arms a little bit sooner. And so I think adjustability is something that people crap on with HLP, but I think it's the most adjustable swing that you could actually have. You know, now a lot of things go into it. It doesn't guarantee you success.
Right, sure.
You know, like mental performance anxiety and things like that are going to play a significant role. Your bat to ball skills, your hand-eye coordination, like everything. Yeah. Your genetics, like how explosive you are, how strong, everything plays a role in how successful you're going to be in this game. And then honestly, your instincts, you know, and like how you're perceiving what's actually coming. All of that is going to determine whether or not you're going to be successful. But if I want to put myself in the best position to succeed, I want to have myself the most time and the most availability to make adjustments when I need it. And in my opinion, that's what HLP does.
Yeah, I like that's how one of the ways I used to tell guys, as far as I used to just say middle opposite field was always our approach.
Yeah.
That's where our approach was, because I always felt like that helped with the direction of our extension, and we'd work extension, but that was what I wanted them to think. I wanted them to think.
Would you mind if I asked you a question based off
Sure.
that? So what if can you recall back when you were playing, when you remember like the move 'em over rounds and stuff like that? I don't know if people still, I'm assuming they still do that, right? Where it's like move 'em over, there's invisible runners, and then it's like, runner on second, and then it's like your 15-year-old kids are like, I'm just trying to hit, you know? And it's, but you remember those, right? And so on those move 'em over rounds, or the rounds where your coach was like, hey, our goal is second base, I can remember, for me at least, do you remember ever feeling like all you're doing is pushing the barrel over there, and then he throws inside and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the worst swing ever, and then you're like trying to force something that's unnatural? Do you remember doing that at all?
So and this is being honest.
Yeah.
This is for me. Again, this is where I think the individuality comes into play.
Perspective.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a right center gap guy.
Yeah.
That was naturally. I mean, my dad taught me, again, wanted to live. He was a true pull guy when he played pro ball. Like, I mean, he said, if I could even just hit a couple balls to right field, I probably would have made it to the bigs and been there a while. He's like, I just yanked everything. I stood on the plate and just said, throw me. And if you were inside, I just, I didn't do it. He's like, I made a living off mistakes. Yeah. Basically. So when I was coming up, he probably, shifted heavily and said, hey, listen, if we're going to go the other way, we're going to go the other way. And I was a faster runner, stole bases. I didn't have the type of power that my dad had. But it's not like I was gap to gap primarily. But anyway, to say that being said, that wasn't really an issue to me. The way I was always taught, it was our approach is going to be right center gap. When a ball is inside, you have to react. And that was always the way I was taught. And I had really quick hands. I was more of a quick twitch guy just in general, how I was built. That's why I ran fast. And so like I didn't really have a problem turning on the inside pitch. Now I wasn't hitting home runs, but did not have a problem putting a ball down the line, as a double down the line on an inside fastball. Even though my approach was, okay, I'm going to sit middle away. I'm just going to pepper everything in this right center gap, and the ball comes in, boom, I got to react to it.
And I think that approach is pretty common. But what I see in like the player development space is when we hammer, I want to go outside so much, and I want you to hit everything to second base or to the opposite field so much that then when you do come inside, it's really hard for them to just react. Yeah. You take somebody with some physical ability, some skill, maybe some experience, and they can just react. But oftentimes the inside pitch is actually one of the hardest pitches to hit, especially as they move up in the game. It becomes more difficult now than what it used to be. And maybe it's because coaching has gotten so heavy with technique over the last 10 years, right? Where it's just like hitters are no longer like natural for themselves at all. But in that process, I think that what we're saying the same thing a different way. Yeah. Like in my opinion, when we're launching, it's all about trying to go to the opposite field the moment at launch. But after that, it's like, because you have the ability to adjust, you can then react and hit it inside. And so we're saying the same thing. It's just your perspective is very different than mine. And that's completely okay. Yeah. Because I had that same perspective when I played. Unfortunately for me is whenever they told me to do that, I pushed as hard as I could to second base. Right. And in practice, when they told me to do that and then they threw inside, it was usually thumbs roll over. I had a hard time hitting the inside. inside pitch because I was so heavily focused. Like I have to hit every ball right center, and I have to just make sure that I push it out there. So I changed my swing to just basically please them in that way, if that makes sense.
No, I 100% get that. And I think maybe one of the reasons why that wasn't necessarily a struggle as much for me is I was also preached to very much hands. Like I was a very handsy hitter.
Yeah.
And now I know that's very unpopular probably now, and again, that's fine. But like for me, I was always explained to it's like, loose. It's like you're throwing the barrel everywhere it is, right? And so when I thought extension opposite field, I always thought I'm throwing the barrel. I'm not pushing. I'm like literally, I'm still getting this snap, at contact to come out through. And so it wasn't like I don't know. But again, that was for me. And I always thought, like, even when I was giving instruction, I think Edgar Martinez used to say, because he was a righty, right? He was a righty hitter. He used to say he used to pretend the left side of the field never existed. And he pulled the ball a lot too. But like his mindset was, this is the only place I can go.
Absolutely. And we have HLP guys in the league right now that's all that they do.
Yeah. And it's not that they don't pull; they pull, of course.
And then
you know
they pull.
What I mean?
Yeah, like they still have a similar approach. It's just that when they go back and they look at video, when they want to make adjustments to their swing, they're not basing it based off like where just the ball went or like how they finished through extension on the ball. Like they didn't go, like their arms didn't push towards right center, so it was bad. Instead, they take it back a few before that, a few phases before that, and they're like, well, how did I actually load? Was I on time? Was I ready to actually hit a good pitch? Was I ready at release when he threw it? Did I have the ability to swing? Was the direction of my launch good? And so it's like they can cross stuff off now comparative to just making decisions based off of, well, I clipped underneath, I clipped on top, or it was inside and I kind of got jammed. And so now I just need to like be ready sooner. It's like, it's a little bit different now than even back when I was making decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, is like the one of the most common misconceptions about HLP?
Oh, that we swing up. We don't swing up. Never. I've never said one time in the cage, swing up. Okay, so our goal, we swing down. We just swing down our backs. And I know that's...
you just did a video about this.
I literally just did a video about this. Yeah, and so the goal with us is as we're turning the barrel, we still have this feeling in our hands that is taking this barrel down. I mean, at the end of the day, like a good pitch is going to be underneath your hands anyway. So like there's this feeling of the barrel still coming down. The difference is that we have context on how we want to turn it. And so like when I turn the barrel down, I'm swinging down in my mind, right? Like I'm swinging heavily down. I'm just turning the barrel like this as I swing down. And so you couple this feeling with the rear leg turning and the emphasis on swinging down, and you couple all those together and you get the result of what looks like, I guess the epitome of it would be amazing, like Aaron Judge at the prime of his career right now, right? But when you see constraint drills that are focused on just this, then everybody assumes that, well, you're just trying to drop the barrel and swing up. And it's like none of us are trying to do that. You're just seeing one small portion of the swing where we're trying to exaggerate a feeling, and we're trying to train something that is completely against what most hitters have been training their whole life with swinging down in this way. And we're trying to ingrain that and make a change to them, like systematically over a long period of time. But you're only seeing like a brief moment on camera on social media of a drill. You see what I'm saying? And so people see that and they're like, oh, they're swinging up. They see that we're staying on one leg excessively longer than they ever would in a game. They're like, they're stuck back, and then because there's no massive forward momentum and some big scissor, they're like, oh, well, now you're spinning. And it's like, but we're not, like I think what people are seeing on camera is just so against their biased worldview on how they viewed the swing their whole life that regardless of how open-minded their Instagram bio says, they're really not. And they're not willing to apply the scientific theory and actually trial test this over a long period of time with a ton of athletes over a wide demographic of different age groups. And because they lack that ability to actually go do that, they'll never open their mind to actually trying it for a long period of time, And so it's like, that's why I'm so confident in it and I'm passionate about it, is just because I've trained more people with HLP than anybody else in the world. And it's only because we have a full-time staff. We train hitters around the country. We have 2 locations. And so we have the ability to train thousands of athletes. And because of that, we have the data to back up like how we created the systems for it. And like, that's why my perspective is different. Now I'm open to other people's perspectives because I was there.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we've had to take on thousands of athletes who come in with that same perspective. So we've had to learn how to like work around that perspective in order to get the desired outcome that we want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's possible for anybody if they actually like be as open-minded as their Instagram bio allows them to be. You know?
Would you say, and I think I feel this way about even just a lot of different hitting philosophies, not just HLP. Do you think there's ever a time when we overtrain something that could potentially just happen naturally?
That's a good question. I think so. I don't think that happens too often, though. I think what usually happens is we undertrain things because we think we're better than what we are. And so I think that the opposite end of that spectrum happens way more than that. You know, I think, like any coach can kind of beat a dead horse. I've done it. Like, I still make mistakes. I've been coaching for over a decade now. You know, I think I had my first lesson in like 2014. And so I still find times where I'm like, just shut up. You know, like don't talk and just like let this athlete do what he needs to do. And that's just part of like experience with coaching. I think that the longer you're in the game, you realize like, okay, everybody does have an ego, and everybody, you know, can tend to coach too much and beat a dead horse too often. And it's just like your experience. I think you get better at it the more that you coach and the better that you do it. Right. But I think the opposite end of that spectrum happens way more, that people actually undertrain significantly, whether in the weight room or with their swing, and they focus on things that they're good at instead of stuff that they suck at. That's why we only get people really who have been in enough pain to actually be like, I'm going to do this all the way, and I'm going to see if this works. And it's not people who are like, I'm going to try it for an off season, or I'm going to try it for 2 months. It's people who are like, I'm going to try this because I see it on video. It makes sense to me. I'm struggling right now, usually, is where it comes from. And they're like, I need to just figure this out. And then those are the people who usually see success over a long period of time. So they're doing it for 2, 3, 4 years. Like, our best athletes have done it for years, and they're good now, you know. And it's like, who's to say that they would be better if they didn't do it, you know? But in my opinion, they're where they're at right now because they went all in on it years ago.
And this is a philosophy thing too, is if a guy comes into you and let's say he's got the other, you know, the swing down, whatever philosophy, and he's having success. Yeah. Do you change him?
We don't work with him. Yeah. Okay. So if they come in and they're like, I'm already seeing success. This is what I want to do. This is how I hit. You're just here to put.
What if they were open? What if they were open to switching? You would change.
Oh, then we'd work with them. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We would work with them and try to get them to figure it out the best that we could. But if they come in, and this happens a lot at other facilities, because I don't know why you would allow it, but they also don't have like the same mission that we have. Think about it, like our mission is to make an impact at the highest level of the game and implement these systems to change thousands and millions of athletes, you know, around the world. And so in order to do that, we have to be really true to what our systems actually are. We have to be willing to trial test the same stuff over a large period of or a large demographic, right? And so when an athlete comes in, it's like, this is how I hit. Just put the ball on the tee and feed the machine. It's like, dude, you can say that to your team coach, but you can't do that here. Right. You know, so no, like, you're coming here to work, and we have a system for it. You know?
Because like when I used to do some stuff mainly when I was coaching teams, so not lessons. I was obviously someone's coming in for a lesson. They are coming in for you to give them something. Right. You know, so maybe that was a bad question, but like when I was coaching teams, there would be kids that, you know, I'd be looking at their swings and you see flaws, right? Obviously, you're like, okay, well, like, we got to work on this, we got to work on X, Y, Z, but they're crushing it. Yeah. And my always philosophy was, if it works, we're gonna ride with it until it starts failing, and then once it starts failing, it kind of to your pain point. Once it starts failing, then we're gonna talk about what's the issue, because ultimately, I mean, it's probably a very elementary view of it. Yeah. But it's like the idea is to have success. Yeah. So if you're having success with the way you're doing it, even if it's not the way that I think is the best way to do it right now, we'll ride with it for a while. Yeah. And you know, now if you come to me and you say, you know, hey, I don't have the power I'm looking to get, like, you know, I have a high batting average, but I'm missing power. Okay. Yeah. Well, these are some of the things I'm seeing. These are some of the things we're gonna have to work on. We're not gonna do it in season. We're gonna do it at the start of the off season, so we have a full winter to work it. to get comfortable, and then hopefully next season we'll have it down to some point where you're going to get the benefit from it. Was always my perspective. I mean, how's that? Your opinion on that?
I wish more coaches had that similar perspective, especially team coaches. And I think this is big for parents, especially who are going to watch this. We have to decipher between where development happens and where like team happens. There's a big difference there. I don't believe that development happens on your team. And this may piss some coaches off, but I think that if I'm a team coach, my job is to put the best lineup there. And then usually colleges, pro organizations, and even now, probably Little League organizations at this point, they have recruiters that literally go out and they try to recruit the best athletes for their teams. And so you have recruiters that are only picking top talent for these select teams, right? And that's why you host a tryout as well for other younger teams, is because you're trying to select the best people to then put on the lineup. And then you basically have like an inter squad or like an interium tryout with your team where it's like, all right, now I'm going to try to put the best players in the lineup. There's not enough time in the day for a team coach to develop the players. They get 25 to 50 ground balls. They get 25 swings in a day, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And they're there for 2 to 3 hours running like organizational structure with base running, with fielding, with defense, with cutoffs, with relays, with bunt defense. It's too much because the coach has to prioritize the team's like winning reality as a whole. Like their whole goal is to win the game, put the best lineup on the field. That's their goal. And so it's like, stay in your lane, in my opinion, like keep doing that because you do that great, but trying to develop these players, in my opinion, should happen in the private sector. And so I think now what is happening is parents are confused because they're signing up for their athletes to play year round. And they're like, why aren't they getting better? And it's like, well, they play hundreds of games. Right. And then they go to team practices where they get 25 ground balls and 25 swings. Like there's a reason why they're not developing. And then you also put their physical development on the back burner because they don't have enough time for strength training, right? Yeah. And so I think that if more coaches had that perspective where it's like, you mentioned we're going to do this in the offseason. Well, why is that? Well, you have a hard time being able to do it in season. How can you train that one person to improve this one flaw in their swing when you have 25, 30 more other players to worry about? Yeah. It's like that's also not your job. You know what I'm saying? It's hard.
And to me, it was even more of a mental thing for kids, right? Because when you're trying to get a kid to buy in on a new concept, whatever the concept is, if you have a game this weekend and now you're trying to implement that concept, which we know there's going to be failure, you're going to get worse before you get better.
100%.
And so and I would say if you're hitting well, if you're doing terrible, it is what it is, so it's like, well, you're already, what more could we do? You're already striking out every time. So you might as well just give this a shot, right? Yeah. But if you're doing well, I would always tell kids that, they come for lessons in the summer. I'd be like, I don't want you to try. Like, I'm not even going to, how are you hitting? Oh, I'm hitting great.
Yeah, okay. Don't fix what's not broken.
Yeah, let's take a look. If there's anything, maybe I can help you with some off speed. We'll work on some different things, but I'm not going to change anything right now because you're hitting well. If it's just a mental reset, sure, we could talk about that and just make sure you're staying consistent with what you're doing. But yeah, it was more of a mental thing because you didn't want them to try, and then all of a sudden next weekend they do terrible, and then I see them the following week, and they're like, "Man, this guy coach doesn't know what he's talking about." It's like, I'm not going to listen to what he's now. I lost the buy-in.
I get it.
But when you get a full winter of no games,
and they can actually just focus on development,
and then you basically change the meter of success. Yeah. Right. Versus because kids, no matter how much you tell them not to be results driven in a game, they are. So but in a cage when you're working with them, you can change that. You say, hey, listen, this is what we're focused on. If you do this right, that's a successful swing.
100%.
You know what I mean? So we could do that all winter, and then all of a sudden we know that in the long run it'll help them in the games. It's was always my viewpoint on that. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I didn't want to really talk about travel ball because I've actually asked a handful of guests on that, and a lot of them say the same because a lot of them are in the private sector, mainly in the fielding space. A lot of the guys that come in, and and the similar thing, the development at the travel ball level, their opinion was just not there as much. I think the pushback a little bit on that is baseball is obviously more than mechanics.
Yeah, and there's like swinging in a cage.
Correct. Yeah, so like the coaching, I would say developing different things. Yeah. Right. So like even from a defensive standpoint, I mean, cutoffs and relays and like situational things. Those are stuff that even as I would try to implement those in my lessons.
Yeah, you can't learn that unless you're in the game.
You're in the game, right? Yeah. And so I would say these travel coaches and high school coaches, they do play a huge role in the development of the player if they take advantage of them.
Yeah.
And not all coaches do, but I think a lot of them do.
Yeah.
Is how to teach those sides of the game, because if you spend your whole life hitting in a cage and becoming a great hitter, but you're a bad baseball player,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's not going to help you either, unless you're going to be, someone that's going to be as good of a hitter as like a Soto or a Judge, then it covers some flaws, but like. You're going to need to play the game, as well,
100%.
And so I feel like these high school coaches and travel coaches do play a huge role in that side of the development.
Yeah, I agree.
To give them some credit and, with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to that. One, I think that athletes in general, they usually don't lack a ton of baseball instincts at older levels or at more experienced levels, right? Like they know how to do cuts, they know how to do release, they know how to do bunt defense. By the time you're in college, it's like, dude, why are we spending 45 minutes doing bunt defense right now? Like I get it. Like I know how to do it, Not saying that it's not valuable to do it and to touch on it to make sure that the experience is there. So when the moment does happen, like it's second nature and you can do it. But at this point now, they've been doing it for like 10 years, And so at younger levels, I see how important that is and I get it. But we also have to take note on like what is more important. Right. And like, how do the athletes actually get better right now so they stay in the game longer and so they can start to see like the reap what they sow. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of that is going to come from investing in development outside of the teams and then still finding a way to manage both year round on a consistent basis and not dip your toes in the water on one and then go all in on the other. Yeah. And I think that would be like the perfect combo. But it's hard. And I know financially it's hard as well for families. It's not easy to afford like premier training for your athlete year round, at a private facility. Like we're not cheap by any means, but we're not cheap because we're really good. And I think that being able to manage that plus also being able to manage like making sure that your son goes and plays the game and gets the reward and feels they get motivation when they get to show up to a game every day and it keeps them intrigued, right? Yeah. And so this is usually what I tell parents because they ask me all the time, like, should I go play summer ball? Should I go play this? Instead of taking that one-sided biased opinion on like, no, come pay my facility, which is a joke. It's like, look at where the athlete's at right now. Do they have the discipline and do they have the motivation to really get better at baseball because they know that this is what they want to do in high school and college and beyond? Like, is this what they want? If so, they're probably disciplined enough to forego a couple travel ball teams and go all in on their development, and it's not going to hurt them. Whereas the young athlete who is extremely excited to go play games every day, but they haven't found that motivation in the weight room yet. They haven't found motivation to like go practice on their own yet and things like that. Like it's not there yet. If you remove them from the game there, they're going to remove a lot of the excitement and fun they have for the game, which could keep them out of the game longer, which is not good. Nobody wants that either. So there is like this give and pull. It's not like standard, like when you're this age, development only, or when you're this age, it's this. I think there needs to be some give and take there between the parents and the coaching staffs. Yeah. But then the second part to that I was going to get to was the lesson paradigm. When you're trying to make, changes with an athlete during the season and you drop them off at a lesson with a coach, even if the coach coaches the team or what have you, if it's one lesson, we have to keep in mind that coach's job at the end of the day. Now, I did this, by the way. I did this like a decade ago when I first started because I started with lessons. I want to provide enough stress to get you better in the day, to get you better and to move the needle. But I also want you to come back because I want to eat. Like I need money. Like at the end of the day, like you're funding these coaches. This is what they do for a living. And so regardless of how coaches want to act like it's not about money, it's not about money. Like you still want to be able to provide for your family or live, your life and not be completely broke. And so those coaches who are doing the lessons and that's how they're like trading their time for money on a consistent basis, at the end of the day, they want you to come back. And so that's going to determine the amount of stress that they put in that session for you. So often what happens at OPP is for like the first week or two, like you suck and you're terrible. And it feels kind of bad because you're like, oh, I'm not that good. These drills are really hard and I don't do things very well. And if we only did lessons, we would lose half of the athletes. We wouldn't be able to trial test the systems and see what works, right? And so I think when we're looking for development options for our athletes as well, like we need to consider that putting a Band-Aid on it and being stuck in the lesson paradigm doesn't really help anybody, in my opinion. Now, there are people out there, by the way, really good coaches who do lessons privately. They exist. I think that model's phasing out. And it's definitely something that we try to teach all of our licensees who come into the license program when we mentor them to just get out of that as fast as possible, because it's not scalable. It's financially just not good. Personal life sucks when you do it. Like it's bad, but it's also not going to get the best results for the athletes. And I think we all know that. But you know, it's like, what are you going to tell the coaches? Like, this is how I provide for my family, and I have lessons all day, but I only see Johnny once a week. Like, I don't want to tell Johnny not to come in.
Right.
You know, like, and he still wants to make an impact and provide something great for the athlete. So I get it, but as parents, like, we got to do what's best for them. And I think investing in long-term development options and not trying to find the Band-Aid, to your point, especially even in season, this is why keeping somebody year-round doing training like that is extremely valuable.
Yeah, there's a couple points to that, which I agree with. I do think the optimal way of doing it is that kind of full in, you know, every day. Obviously, I did lessons for a long time, right? Yeah. And I used to.
I did as well. I wasn't completely crapping. I did back in the day.
I actually not kicked kids out, but I had the conversation with their parents. I said, you shouldn't bring them back. Yeah. Because what I explained to kids, because at the start of every lesson, I'd say, okay, we'd set practice, you know, how much you need to practice in between lessons. And, you know, most kids, you ask them how much do you practice this week, and they say, you know, well, I didn't get a lot, and that always means 0. And so, like, you know, you have that happen in the beginning. It's okay, but this is what we need to do. You know, we need to start stacking days. We need to start, you know, whatever, doing this whole thing. But after a while, if they're still not doing it, I had many conversations with students, and with Dad standing right there, and I said, listen, this is going to be our last lesson. Yeah. Like, you can't sign up again. I said, because you know why? I said, because I feel like
you're stealing money at that point.
I said, I literally, and this was my speech. I always said, I feel like I'm reaching in your dad's pocket and taking the money, and I'm stealing it.
Well, that's because I
have a real problem with that, because I'm telling you the same thing I told you the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I said, and that is not enjoyable for me. It's not enjoyable for your dad to listen to me do it to you. I said, so like, either you're going to start practicing, or we're just done with lessons. I'll fill it with someone else. Yeah. Like, that's going to actually practice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then on the other layer of that is, it's a bad representation of my instruction.
Yeah.
Because
it really is.
Because you're not getting better.
They're a billboard for you. Yeah. That's
it's like, you know, when you go hit and it's not that every kid that you give lessons to is going to be amazing. You know what I mean? There's development. It's on a journey, right? Yeah. Everyone's at a different part of their journey. But if you're staying here because you're not putting the effort in, and it's not because of my instruction, that's the issue I have. Yeah. You know, I would do that, and that's, you know, I think it's important. But the other side of that is what you're doing to have that. I think that's so important. That is going to be where you're getting, you know, a huge development.
Yeah.
I guess a question for you, because I think that's so important. How much of, like, your players' success do you think is because of the HLP technique versus the system that you have, as far as the amount of times, the weight room, the days that they're coming in and working with you, a percentage wise, and again, you know, obviously I know you believe HLP, so I'm not trying to say it's a small, maybe a very high percentage. If you were to have these same structures with a different hitting philosophy, would you, I guess, how much does that weigh into it, I guess?
I think it weighed in a lot. So back when the company first started, we actually didn't have that many hitters. Okay. It was mostly throwers, just because, you know, we organized the throwing frequency, volume, intensity really well with our weight room. And the way that we organize our weight room is really different. We're the only conjugate-based strength conditioning program in the world that I know of that offers it at this level. And so because of that, our throwers started throwing really hard. And so everybody wants velocity. And so they were like, hey, I'm going to come over here. So we actually had a lot more throwers. So success as a program as a whole, it's really hard to answer that. What I can say is, for hitting, I think the HLP technique helped, but it didn't really transform careers until we coupled it with our strength conditioning system, and then we built the system behind HLP. So there's a difference between just understanding the technique and then applying a system to it, so that way you can learn it, ingrain it, teach it yourself, and then, you know, actually be like a representation of what it is. And I think that surface level is like just technique, information from that. And to get one layer deeper, it's the system behind it, which integrates with our conjugate-based strength conditioning system as well. So percentage-wise, man, I can't answer that. You know what I'm saying? But I can say that it's heavily, if I were to answer, I would say 100% of the success is because of the systems that we've organized from it. But because of what our goal is, that's been my main mission since the day that I opened the company.
Yeah.
So, because I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to try to make an impact at the highest level.
Yeah.
And so it was already way beyond money, way beyond anything that I could think of at the very beginning. And that's kind of what drove it. That's why we were so obsessive about creating the systems. So I think that without the weight training and without the system to fall back on like having an understanding of what the phases of the swing are and where you can reverse and see like how to fix certain parts and what drill goes here when you do it, how to do linear and randomized periodization with HLP and things like that. I think without that, we would be left with just the technique, which would be much, much more difficult. It'd be very hard. We'd be stuck in lesson paradigms at that point too, which would take down the success rate drastically.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Are you familiar with like the motor preferences?
I've heard of them, yeah.
Do you know like their philosophy or anything or not?
I saw it for a day and I immediately ruled it out.
Okay.
Just because I think that if you're going to come to the table with something that is hitting related, swing a bat and show that it works and demonstrate it with hundreds or thousands of athletes before you come to the table and say it's the omnipresent thing to do. When that happens, and motor preferences have actually developed hitters, not taking MLB guys and like being like, hey, we recommended he did XYZ because he moves this way, or not college guys and not guys who are already named, right? But like people who have been nobodies, and because they went through your system that you have developed, then say this is the way and do it with hundreds of athletes over different age groups and then say that, I think then I'd be open to the scientific theory exploring something like that.
Have they not? I'm not super familiar with it.
I don't believe so. From my understanding, they haven't. And if they have, they've just done a bad job of exporting that because we have a whole team that looks up like what's coming. Okay. And so I think that we would know if they did. If not, then they just need to get better at marketing it. But as of right now, I don't think that is a thing. And I think that it kind of falls into like, all these certifications that came up. I don't want to say any names, but you can get certified in anything that you want and do a mobility assessment for a hitter. But if you can't swing a bat and actually teach somebody how to do it, I don't think you're a real hitting coach. I think what you're doing is just selling information to people who want it. And coaches want information so bad. If I dropped a certificate instead of a license, I mean, we had guys when I dropped the license, Korea, Japan, all over the country calling and asking about the license because information for coaches is so easy to sell. Like that's what they want really bad. So when you come out and you're like, hey, we can get you certified in XYZ, we can get you certified in this assessment that tells you where like your mobility lacks so you can help your hit. It's like coaches are like, oh, give me more. Even if they don't have a track record of actually proving success through a system.
Right.
It's just more information. It's like how much of that is actually going to affect how you develop these hitters. And so from afar, when I looked at it, now granted, I don't have a ton of information on it. So if it ever gets improved or whatever and it becomes valuable, I will implement it. I'm not going to just crap on something because of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be abiding by scientific theory anyway. So, but if it ever becomes valuable, I'll do it. But up to this point, what I've seen from that specifically is that it's just another information cell. And so for us, it's like, it's just not valuable yet.
So do you think it's imperative that the coach is able to do what he's teaching?
I think it's imperative that the coach can demonstrate and cue excessively at a high rate because if the older that you get, the harder that it becomes. But then you look at somebody like Richard, who's, I believe he's in his mid-70s now, and he can still swing a bat. And I watched him, when Judge came by the facility, and I watched him swing a bat, and I watched him go through that process. There's a different layer of coaching that you can do when you've actually done the thing, And I relate it to this because I know skill stuff, it's really hard. But for weightlifting, for example, would you pay a strength coach to coach you if he was a $180 and never lifted over his body weight with anything? Like probably not. But if the guy came in and he's 225 pounds, he's stacked and he's or he's just extremely strong, can deadlift 600 pounds, squat XYZ, and do all these things, you'd be like, yeah, I'm probably going to listen to you because you've been through it, right? Like the weights don't discriminate. So you can definitely tell somebody's actually been there and done that, and they put in the effort and work to know what it takes to get there. So when that person's coaching you on the weight room, they're going to coach you from a perspective that is somebody who's actually been there and done that, and they know, And so I think that it's imperative that you have the ability to. You don't have to be Ken Griffey Jr. to coach the swing, but I think that you need to have the ability to demonstrate what you believe is correct. And if you can do that, then you can transfer those cues, and you can also provide a different layer of coaching for the athlete comparative to somebody who just stands behind a laptop and shouts your data at you, which I think is like the worst possible thing a coach could do. Like, when I work with pro guys all the time, that's like pretty much what I do now. Instead of I love working with the younger guys. I just don't have the time. So like so most of my time is spent working with the pro guys. When I work with them, the first thing that they do is talk about how they can't stand getting coached from people behind a laptop. It's like, get up here and show me what you want to do. Like demonstrate for me. I can't tell you how many times the breakthrough moment with a pro guy has been because I say something to do something and they're like, and they hand me the bat and I'm like, okay. And then I show them and they're like, oh, that makes sense, because it's like a different layer of being able to coach somebody.
Yeah.
You know, if I was trying to teach this and I couldn't do it, nobody would understand it very well. And I also wouldn't be able to teach my employees how to do it. And then my employees wouldn't be able to teach it very well. And so, yeah, I think that it's important, but you don't have to be amazing. Like you don't have to win world records to be a strength coach.
Right.
You know, but you got to be strong, decently strong. Like you had to have gone through the trial and errors of like understanding weight training and progressing yourself with intensity, volume, and the frequency of your lifts to understand how to do that for somebody else.
Right.
You know?
And we talked about this yesterday when we were at the range, but that could be an argument that, you know, guys that played at a high level.
Oh, that's their best argument,
right?
In my opinion, is because they actually did the thing. So they can go in there and tell you, hey, based off my experience, this is what I've done. And I've paid a lot of ex-pro guys when I was coming up, and my dad as well, like did that for me in high school. You know, because we didn't have a lot of people. And whenever a pro guy was there, it was like, oh, we're going to go pay him to do it. The thing is like, would you rather pay somebody who's been there and done that, or pay somebody who's been there and done that with thousands of athletes just like you and taking them from where they want to go to where they want to get to? And so in my opinion, I just want to kind of go where the data goes, and I just want to go like where the experience lies, with both playing experience, if possible, and with real experience teaching other people how to get to what I want.
Yeah.
You know, like if you've only done it with yourself, awesome. Like I'll still listen to you because there's so much value to learn from a pro player, so much value. Like when I sit and we hit in usually like groups of 4 with our pro guys, and I'll sit there, me and my assistant, and we'll just sometimes listen to them talk. And it's like the value that they give to each other is beyond what we can actually give to them, because they're in the game right now. Like they're the ones facing the best players in the world. And the value that they have to give to each other, they're coaching each other. But we're there for like the technique and, you know, the guidance. But it's like they're getting like real game advice right then in the moment from people who are playing. I think the value that professional players have is extremely high. But if you've never taught other people how to do the thing at a high level, and you haven't gotten hundreds or thousands of hundreds probably at least athletes to get them from where they currently are to where they are, do you really know? Just because you did it with yourself, like, do you really know? And I would challenge that, because then a lot of pro guys, they're probably going to get mad at that, and they're going to be like, of course I know. I did the thing. I got paid millions of dollars. I did this for 10 years. And it's like, cool, but did you teach other people how to be just as successful as you or more successful than you? Probably not. And so like the ones that I really respect are the guys who like put their money where their mouth is and they coach. And when they, and not saying I don't respect players who don't coach, like obviously you don't have to, but when they leave the game and they coach and they're able to like transform people's lives, you see it a lot in the pitching development space, which is really cool. Not that many hitters have done that I know of. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but when you leave the game and you coach and you really help develop players on a very intricate level, and you take them from where they are to where they need to be, and you do it over a consistent period of time, you have a track record at that point. And people know who you are, not just from who you played, but how you coached. And I think that is like the ultimate unlock. I don't have that. I don't have that ability because I didn't play at a high level. So for me, I had to swing the pendulum the other way and be like, I need to be as smart as possible, and I also need to be able to demonstrate as best as I possibly can. And so if I didn't demonstrate and I was just smart, not saying that I'm intelligent. That sounds super ego. But if I just stood behind a laptop and I couldn't demonstrate, I would lose all wars, right? But the fact that I can demonstrate, I can hit a little bit, and I can, like coach, and I can cue, and I can talk from that experience of playing a little bit. That gives me one up in my coaching. If somebody were to stop playing at a high level, like a major league player did really well in his career, and really developed a track record with coaching and developed players at a high level, he would be amazing, because the experience that he has comparative to what I have is drastically better than me. Like he would be able to do things that I couldn't do. He would be able to break through and get through those mental barriers with other athletes who need that significantly faster than I ever could. Like for somebody in my position, I have to prove it. And I have to prove it with volume, with how many athletes that we've done. And I have to prove it in the moment by being able to demonstrate it right there. If Ken Griffey Jr. walked in the cage tomorrow and he said, hey, this is how I think you should hit, everybody would be like, yes, sir. And it wouldn't matter, because his presence gives so much authority in that moment that it's like, I'm going to do whatever you got to say, dude, which is awesome. That's great. That's the amount of influence that you can have on somebody is
he's earned the right for that.
Unbelievable, right? But it's like, I think there's another layer to it, that if you're going to coach, I think you should pursue coaching at the highest level as well, and not just, shout from the rooftops because you did it.
Yeah. To that point, and that was one of my things, even just, and again, not just with HLP or with other things, taking drills without context is a big thing on social media. And when I was doing lessons, kids would come in and they say, hey, I saw this drill. I'd be like, one, that's not even remotely what we're working on right now. Just because you saw it doesn't mean, one, you should do it.
Yeah.
And you don't know what they were trying to accomplish in that moment. You know what I mean? And I'm glad I actually wasn't recording a lot of my lessons, because I've had kids do some crazy things to get them to feel a certain thing. And if I posted that, I would have probably got blasted on social media. Like, what is this guy teaching? And it's like, well, you weren't in the full hour lesson with me.
Yeah.
What this kid was specifically struggling with, and I had to go to the other extreme just to get him to feel something
100%.
that I want him to get. And so I mean, it's a challenging.
Well,
dynamic.
To be clear too, like I don't crap on the idea of like weird things. If you look at our videos, we do very weird drills, but I think the way that we go about it is kind of different. And so like we have a process with our coaches. Like, you can't add anything to the system until you have established that you're going to trial test it for a period of time. And so if they're like, hey, there's this new thing that I want to do because I think it's going to help X, Y, and Z when we do it, I'll be like, okay, so we're going to test this over a long. So you have to do it with every group, with every athlete for a long period of time, and collect all the data from it, and make sure that you're collecting the videos of befores and afters, and see if that little thing that you implemented actually makes changes. Yeah. And then if it does, we will add it to the system and say that it's a positive thing. But if it doesn't, and you can't actually see that it changed anything, you just added fat.
Yeah.
And we got to trim fat at all costs as our company grows. And so what happens right now, though, is because I don't think people think in systems anymore, because it's like whatever can sell right now. And so we're just going to go the fastest way possible to grow. They don't think that way. So instead of being willing to test something for a long period of time, it's like, I'm just going to do this drill and post it and say, this is what this fixes. It's like, you don't even know if that's what it fixes. Like, you just literally thought of that drill yesterday and you got the feel from it and you saw it on social media and you're like, I'm going to create a video tomorrow. Yeah. And it's like, okay, great, dude. But let's see that in 4 months after you've done it with like 400 people and you've done it for a long period of time. Does it actually move the needle? I just wish that people thought that way, because then we could actually get to the root cause of like why hitting is so behind, and we could figure out how to progress it forward. I feel like that's what happened with throwing, and throwing took leaps and strides. Driveline baseball was a massive implementation with how they did it. And it was systems. It was systems way of thinking. Kyle Bodie was actually a big influence on me with his systems, and so Louis Simmons as well, because the way that they went about developing their systems, there was so much structure to it. And you could tell that it was thought deeply from every aspect on like frequency, volume, intensity, and the way that they processed it. I was like, why doesn't this exist for hitting? And so that was one of the things that we did. Anyways, that's my way of saying social media sucks. And if you see a drill tomorrow, don't just do it. Like, follow the process. And I talk about this a lot. That's why our YouTube videos are so in depth. Even though they're 10 to 30 minutes long, it's like they're in depth for a reason. And I always leave little tidbits in there like, hey, like, I know you like the free thing, but like, get coaching, like, please, because the free thing can only get you so far, you know.
That's good. And as we I don't even know how long we've been going, but I've enjoyed this conversation, by the way.
I have too.
I really appreciate it. You know what I mean? But I always give the guest the opportunity as we close just to give, could be any sort of advice. It could be advice on hitting, it could be advice on life, perspective. I mean, you've touched on a lot of things today.
Yeah.
Just something you want to leave the listener with. Is there anything that comes to mind?
That's a really good question. I would say one of the biggest issues that I've ran into lately, over probably since 2022, I was heavy on the floor in 2022. I kind of worked my way off the coaching floor right around 2020, end of 2023. 2024 through 25, I had to really focus on the company because it was getting larger. But from 2022 to now, one of the biggest things that we see inside the facility, and then even with our athletes remotely, is they're afraid to say what they actually want. So they're afraid to say what their real dreams are in this game, and they're not very confident in themselves. And it's largely because they allow outside circumstances and their environment and their parents, unfortunately, and their friends to influence them in such a negative light that they think negative about themselves. So I think performance anxiety and mental issues inside the game are drastically higher now than they've ever been, but it gets neglected mainly because everything's just about the end result. So I would say for the athletes that are out there watching, change your environment to heavily influence your life and be very productive in the fact that you have to know that everything that you allow into your mind and everything that somebody says to you and everything that you accept as truth in your reality will dictate your actions, and your actions will dictate the outcome of your life. And that's for everything. So if you could possibly change your environment and make positive choices towards the outcome that you actually want, you're going to see that you're going to have to cut a lot of people out. You're going to only have to listen to yourself for a period of time. Your parents may not be the most amazing influence that you've ever had for stuff like that. Like mine weren't. Mine were plan B parents consistently the whole time. But if I would have listened to my parents, when I love my parents, by the way, if I would have listened to them, I never would have started a baseball training company. And I wouldn't be as successful as I am right now. And I wouldn't be able to take care of employees and my family the way that I do. And I wouldn't have been able to impact thousands of athletes' lives. So I think that the best advice that I could give to you is like be confident in who you are and make sure that you're consistently upgrading your environment and allowing what you want to allow into your life to get to where you want to go.
Well, that's a perfect circle because we started off with your story and how you were able, that turning point of your life was that change in the environment. So yeah. I think that's a perfect way for us to close this out. So man, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. And then if you've made it this far in the podcast, all the way to the end, one, thank you again. Another long one back to back. But I hope it was valuable to you. And don't forget to obviously like and subscribe. And until next time, God bless. Thank you so much for watching this full podcast. If you'd like to watch more content with this guest, feel free to click right here. And if you want to watch another one of our podcasts, click right here.